Hey guys, tonight we're going back to ancient Egypt. Not the golden, glossy one with glamorous pharaohs lounging under palm fronds and posing for statues, but the real one. The one where you wake up on a straw mat, sore from head to toe, with a mouth that tastes suspiciously like sand and last night's onion beer. The air is already thick with heat, even though the sun hasn't shown its full face yet, and a goat is bleeding right next to your ear like it owns the place. That's right. You're not a noble, or a priest, or even one of those mysterious tomb painters. You're a worker, a mud brick shack dweller, a pyramid hauler. And guess what? Today's your lucky day. You're due for a 12-hour shift in the shadow of the biggest limestone monstrosity anyone has ever dared to build. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Let me know where you're tuning in from and what time it is where you are. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You awaken before the stars have fully blinked out of the sky, your joints complaining in every direction. Your legs are sore from yesterday's lifting, your arms from the day before. And your soul? Well, let's just say it's somewhere between lightly dented and needs to be replaced. The room, or rather the box you live in, is made of sun-dried mud brick. It's smaller than your imagination, contains precisely 2 pieces of furniture, a mat, and a wooden bucket, and smells like damp straw and fermented onion. You call it home. Mostly because you have no other word for it. Your mat is thin. Too thin. You've added layers of old tunic beneath it, but the reeds still poke through, tattooing your back in tiny scratches. You sit up, scratching the back of your head and dislodging a bit of plaster from the ceiling in the process. It lands in your lap. You brush it off without much care. It'll be there again tomorrow. You reach for your tunic, which you left hanging on a nail by the doorway. It's stiff, salt-streaked, and smells vaguely of goat, because, surprise, the goat sleeps indoors. The animal, named something like Basifer by your youngest child, is presently chewing the edge of your mat with a blank stare that says, "What are you doing in my space?"
You nudge the goat gently aside and rise to your feet. There's a moment, brief but potent, where your knees wobble so dramatically you feel like a papyrus reed in a storm. But you don't fall. You're stronger than you look, or more stubborn. Either works. Your partner's already up, sitting near the fire pit outside, feeding dry stalks into a tiny flame. They nod without turning as you exit, muttering, "Breakfast's on." Their voice is flat, but functional, like a wooden wheel that still turns even though it's a little warped. You crouch beside them, the fire warming your palms, though the heat hasn't truly left your bones from yesterday. The world is slowly turning blue, cool early light touching the horizon. You can just make out the outlines of other huts like yours, sleepy and quiet, each sheltering a body or two, preparing for the same routine. Your partner hands you a bowl. It's filled with, well, something. Porridge of some sort? No, that would be too fancy. It's more like soaked barley mash with a film of oil and a generous topping of chunky air. There's also a cup of thick, warm beer, Egyptian breakfast of champions, fermented in open jars and just sour enough to wake your entire mouth in protest. You take a sip anyway. Some days you get a few onions with your beer mash. Today isn't one of those days. You take another sip. Still beer, still regret. Historians still argue whether pyramid laborers were volunteers, conscripts, or seasonal workers, but your back doesn't care. All it knows is pain, sweat, and a never-ending battle against gravity. The beer settles in your stomach like a brick wrapped in vinegar. You belch quietly. The goat belches louder. You consider which of you is the more refined creature. Time to get ready. Your work bag is a simple linen pouch, frayed at the seams, holding a strip of leather for gripping blocks, a water skin that leaks slightly, but only when you don't want it to, and a lucky charm, an old scarab-shaped bead that your grandmother once insisted would protect you from curses, crocodiles, and constipation. So far, 2 out of 3. You tie a cloth around your head to keep the sun off your scalp. It helps a little like wearing a wet leaf in a desert, but hey, every bit counts. Outside, the first horns of the morning echo down the sand-packed road that leads to the plateau. Work begins soon. You nod to your partner, give the goat a final glare, and step into the rising day.
The road is alive now. Men, mostly, like you. Some younger, some older. All in various states of enthusiasm, ranging from barely alive to grumpily trudging. A few exchange groggy greetings. One guy is singing something under his breath. You catch a word that might be spleen. It's unclear. You pass a tall post where a wooden sign reads, roughly translated, temple workers to the left, pyramid laborers to the right, idiots straight ahead. You go right. As the sun begins to crest the dunes, the white face of the pyramid appears in the distance. It's partially completed, still a stubby, angular thing, but somehow already enormous. You always forget just how massive it is until you're walking toward it again. The blocks, the ramps, the thousands of feet stomping the dust into flour, it's all waiting for you. You sigh, and then smile. Not because you're happy to be going there, but because there's a strange comfort in knowing exactly how much your day will ache. No surprises, no shifts in flour, no taxes today. Just you, the pyramid, and your trusty water-leaking waterskin. You reach the outer camp gates. An overseer squints at you, holding a wooden tablet. He's trying to look important. He fails. You give him your name. He grunts. Back left ramp, block 517. You're on push detail. Push detail. Of course. You move toward the tool tent. It's mostly just a tarp on sticks, but inside are rows of levers, sleds, and rope bundles that look more like hopeful guesses than actual tools. You grab your usual, a splintered wooden wedge, and the least freight rope. Outside, the sun rises fully now, gilding the pyramid's limestone blocks in bright, hot gold. The sky turns from blue to brutal. Welcome back to work. The pyramid looms ahead, growing larger with every step, like it's leaning toward you in quiet judgment. And you? You take a long sip of warm, half-spilled beer from your waterskin and mutter to yourself, another day, another black. You shuffle into the morning crowd with the momentum of a man being slowly digested by time. All around you, the other workers are doing the same. Shoulders hunched, feet dragging, eyes squinting against a sun that seems to rise specifically to judge your life choices. Sand crunches beneath your sandals, already warm even though the day's just begun. You're not sure how the desert manages to preheat itself, but it does. Every morning, like it's been waiting all night just to fry your ankles. You pass a group of youths, still yawning and adjusting their linen kilts. One is half asleep, his head tilted like a wilting lotus. Another is slapping himself in the face rhythmically in some kind of self-inflicted wake-up ritual. You don't blame him. You once fell asleep standing up during a morning briefing and got whacked in the ear with a reed stick by the foreman. You learned your lesson. Now you just pretend to be awake. It's much safer. You finally make it to the eating zone. It's more of a cleared-out patch of shaded dirt, really, flanked by clay jugs and wooden bowls that have seen better millennia. Everyone's crowding around the serving pit, if that's what you can call a woman with arms like tree trunks ladling something suspiciously gray from a cauldron into waiting hands. Breakfast, in the loosest possible definition. You hold out your bowl and receive a generous dollop of what smells like sour barley, sweat, and hope? Maybe despair. Sometimes it's hard to tell. You sit on a flat rock and begin to eat. It's warm, thick, chewy, and definitely fermented. The beer is poured next, into a clay cup that's still damp from yesterday. It's flat, cloudy, and tastes like someone tried to make bread and then gave up halfway. But it has calories and, more importantly, alcohol. Enough to dull the edges of another day dragging giant rocks in the sun. You chew your breakfast slowly, aware that the more time you spend eating, the less time you'll spend working. It's an ancient Egyptian trick. Stretch the meal, stretch the morning. Around you, the chatter begins to rise. Did you hear about Akman? Someone asks. No, what now?
He fell in a dung pit last night, said he thought it was a shadow. That man couldn't find his own feet with both hands. They laugh. It's not a cheerful laugh, but it's real, and real laughs are rare commodities on the plateau. Your neighbor leans in. His breath smells like yesterday's garlic and anxiety. You ever think about joining the painters? The ones working on tomb walls? Yeah, my cousin got in. Says it's all shade and sitting. You look at your hands, calloused, cracked, coated in dust. You try to imagine them holding a brush, painting falcons on plaster. It's easier to imagine them bursting into flames. Not likely, you say. He shrugs and drinks the rest of his beer in one gulp, then wipes his mouth with the back of his arm. Can't blame a man for dreaming. Dreaming. That's a luxury. You eye your second piece of breakfast. A small, dry onion. Not fresh, not juicy, but definitely pungent. You bite into it anyway. Your mouth catches fire instantly. The tears that well up in your eyes are less about emotions and more about aggressive vegetable chemistry. It's strange how often you cry in the mornings now. Historians still debate whether these beer and onion breakfasts were considered a privilege or a punishment. On the one hand, it was free food. On the other hand, your digestive system might never forgive you. You wash the onion down with the last of your beer. A warm belch escapes before you can stop it. A passing priest shoots you a disapproving glance. You consider apologizing, but your stomach growls louder than your guilt. Breakfast concludes with a ritual so mundane it borders on sacred, the scratching of various limbs, arms, necks, legs. Every worker takes a few precious minutes to engage in a personal war with the invisible army of lice that patrols your clothing like it's their birthright. One man even pulls out a comb and ceremoniously drowns several tiny enemies in his beer. No one bats an eye. Your group leader, a man with the voice of a brass pot rolling down a staircase, shouts something incoherent, which somehow you all understand as "move it or be replaced by goats." You rise, joints creaking, and start the walk to the ramps. Your stomach gurgles ominously. It's not a good sign. You mentally calculate the distance to the nearest latrine trench. It's far. Too far. You pray to Thoth for digestive mercy. The sun is fully awake now, a white-hot coin stamped into a sky that forgot how to blink. Your sweat starts before your feet finish their first step. It's going to be a glistening kind of day. As you march, you review the mental list of things that will go wrong. The rope might fray. The ramp might crack. Someone might collapse mid-pull and take half the crew with them like dominoes made of beef jerky and linen. You pass the canteen tent. They're boiling water with mint leaves, a rare luxury. You take a deep breath as you pass. It smells like dreams you're not allowed to have. You spot a man eating something that looks suspiciously like an actual fig. You do not trust it. Rumors have long swirled around certain fruits at the camp, like the time someone ate a pomegranate and spoke only in bird noises for a week, or the watermelon incident, which no one talks about anymore. The sun climbs higher. You shield your eyes with your hand and glance toward the pyramid. It glows like it's been dipped in fire, the limestone dazzling in the heat. You squint, tracing the outline of the blocks already stacked and aligned like giant stone teeth. The top, still far off, unfinished, unreachable, a daily reminder that your work is far from done. There's a man near you mumbling a prayer, something about ma'at and balance, and how today he would not drop anything, swear at anyone, or crush his own foot. You nod respectfully. It's good to set goals. You reach the staging area at the base of the ramp. It's organized chaos. Sleds loaded, ropes coiled, buckets splashing, voices barking orders and corrections and insults. You find your assigned sled. It's not the worst one.
It's also not the best. You loop your rope through the wooden ring and brace yourself for what will soon become the ancient Egyptian version of deadlifts, squats, and existential crisis all rolled into one. "Ready!" someone shouts. "Pull!" someone else shouts. You dig your feet into the packed sand and tug. And so the work begins. Not glamorous, not sacred, not majestic. Just a man, a rope, and a very, very large block.
The rope digs into your palms like it's trying to carve its name into your bones. With each tug, your heels sink half an inch deeper into the sand-packed ramp, and the granite block lurches forward by maybe a fingernail's length. The sled beneath it groans in complaint, as though even it questions the sanity of this entire project. And yet, forward it moves. One groan, one grunt, one gritty shuffle at a time. You're not alone, thankfully. There are 9 others assigned to your team this morning, and none of them are thrilled to be here. But you all pull, one foot in front of the other, like a row of beetles dragging a sleeping hippo uphill. You try not to think about how many more meters are left to the next platform. It's too early in the day to cry in public. Your foreman, a leathery man with shoulders like ox yokes and a neck that's seen more sun than a sundial, paces alongside you, tapping his reed cane on the ramp rhythmically. Not quite a whip, but the message is clear. Slower feet get smacked. He shouts encouragement in the form of thinly disguised threats. "Move like you mean it, sand sniffers." You pull harder. The sun is rising like it has a personal grudge. Its heat thickens the air, making each breath a little more like sipping steam. By now, the sweat is rolling freely down your spine, gathering in places you'd rather not think about. Your tunic clings to you like an unhappy second skin. And your sandals. Oh, your sandals. They are the worst invention in the history of footwear. 2 leather straps and a patch of palm bark pretending to be a shoe. The left one keeps slipping sideways. The right one has decided to host a family of pebbles. Every step feels like a quiet negotiation with pain. Historians still argue whether workers like you were issued standard footwear or made their own from scraps. Judging by the sad flopping mess on your feet, you assume the latter. Either that, or someone in the sandal department had a wicked sense of humor. The ramp gets steeper. Your muscles complain more loudly. Your spine begins drafting a formal letter of resignation. Just ahead, one of your teammates, a lanky teen named Jet, stumbles. The sled jerks as the rhythm breaks, and the block shifts with a terrifying groan. Everyone freezes. Your heart stops. The block settles again. No one died. This time.
Jet mumbles an apology, brushing sand from his knees. "You all right?" you ask, already resenting the effort it takes to speak. He nods, red-faced. "Just slipped. My sandal's cursed." You grunt. You believe him. Back to pulling. The team leader shouts, "Heave!" And you do, because what else are you gonna do? Run away? Start a new life as a fig merchant? Tempting, but no. The pyramid waits. As you crest a small ledge and reach the flat staging area, you're rewarded with a moment of stillness. The block settles into position beside a row of others, like a very expensive, very heavy game of brick stacking. You drop your rope, stretch your aching back, and take a long, warm gulp from your water skin. It tastes like hope, sweat, and slightly fermented goat. One of the overseers walks past, scribbling something onto a clay tablet with a stylus made of reed. He barely glances at you, just notes your presence, your block number, and probably how close you looked to fainting. You've often wondered what those tablets say, whether they just mark labor quotas, or whether there are little comments like, "Worker number 182, definitely going to collapse tomorrow," or "Still smells like onions." Nearby, a group of men is coating the sled runners with wet sand to reduce friction. It's a small mercy. That simple technique, a mixture of science, desperation, and blind hope,
keeps the sled from catching fire, probably. Interestingly, modern archaeologists only recently confirmed that ancient Egyptians used wet sand to ease the hauling of heavy stones. And yet, somehow, you've always known, because you're the one pulling it. As you sit briefly on a block to catch your breath, you glance out over the plateau. It's a hive of human effort. Ramps, ropes, pulleys, bricks, cranes of wood creaking under weight and time. Men shouting, lifting, groaning, dust rising in slow-motion spirals as if the desert itself is exhaling. And in the distance, glimmering like a cruel mirage, is the Nile, a blue ribbon of life you rarely get close enough to touch. But it's there. Just knowing it flows cool and free is enough to drive you quietly mad. Someone tosses you a dried fig. It's small, shriveled, and somehow already half covered in sand. You eat it anyway. It's the best thing you've tasted in days. "Break's over," comes the shout.
Of course it is. You rise with a grunt, grab a new rope, and join the next team for the next haul. Different block, same pain. As you approach the next sled, your eyes meet those of a stranger across the ramp. He looks about your age, maybe older. His face is half shadowed by a cloth, his beard flecked with gray. You nod at each other with the solemn camaraderie of two people who will probably both die of back pain before age 30. The man raises a hand in brief salute, then leans into his own rope and vanishes from view. You feel it then, that odd spark, that moment of silent solidarity. You are not alone. You are one of many, dozens, hundreds, maybe more. All of you dragging rocks toward the sky, like ants building a tomb for a very large, very picky queen. The heat intensifies. The sun is now a blazing god overhead, and the air wavers with liquid shimmer. A mirage dances at the edge of the ramp, just a trick of the eye, or possibly your brain giving up one neuron at a time. You pull and pull. Your muscles enter that strange place where they no longer scream, they simply buzz, like bees, angry, exhausted bees. You begin to hum under your breath, a work chant. It doesn't have words, just rhythm. Something to distract you from the crushing realization that this block isn't even the biggest one of the day. Somewhere behind you, a man lets out a sudden shout. "Snake!" The entire ramp tenses. You freeze. Then someone laughs. "False alarm! Just a stick!" Another man growls. "Sticks don't hiss." "Yours do!" Laughter follows. Not the hearty cracked, but the dry, cracked variety. Desert humor. It's all you've got. As you pass a crew of overseers, one of them whistles sharply and jots something else down on his tablet. You've long suspected that some of them make up notes just to look busy. You imagine his slate reads, "Worker number 49, suspiciously sweaty." You finally reach the next marker. The stone is deposited with a dull thud. You unhook the rope and stumble back, your breath short, your shirt soaked, your soul somewhere near your ankles. You did it. One block. Hundreds more to go. And yet you manage the faintest smile, because somehow, against all odds, you're still standing. And the pyramid? It's one block closer to being finished.
You barely have time to catch your breath before he shows up. Your foreman, the man, the myth, the permanent scowl. His name is Rainey, though no one dares to say it too loudly. He walks like he owns every rock on this plateau and talks like his voice was carved out of basalt. Rainey isn't tall, but he has the presence of a crocodile in a bathtub. Short, stocky, sun-leathered, and impossible to avoid. He wears the same faded linen each day, patched at the shoulder, cinched at the waist, and always slightly damp, as though his sweat has become one with the garment. His reed cane, the one with the crooked tip, doubles as pointer, metronome, and weapon. He squints at your crew, one hand shading his eyes, the other resting ominously on the cane. His lips purse, like he's just bitten into a sour date. You call that hauling? He growls, and it's not a question. Everyone instinctively stands a little straighter. Spines lengthen, shoulders stiffen. One man even reties his sandals in a last-ditch attempt to look productive. Rainey strides up to your sled, slaps it with his cane, and points at the still faint drag lines left in the sand. Straighten your poles. You're wasting effort like you've got eternity to waste it. You swallow hard and nod. A few others murmur apologies. One guy scratches his head and mutters, "Maybe I do have eternity," which earns him a full glare from Rainey and a very quiet elbow to the ribs from his friend. Rainey walks along the row of workers, muttering judgments as if auditioning for a role in a very ancient, very angry play. Posture like a dying ibis. Grip like a baby goat. Did your mother raise you on wet papyrus? These are compliments, by the way. Or at least, not insults with permanent consequences. You've heard worse. Much worse. Historians still argue whether foremen like Rainey were paid extra to be this unpleasant or if it simply came with the territory, like sand in your teeth or sunburn in your soul. Some suggest their main role was to keep morale high by ensuring no one ever got comfortable enough to notice they were suffering. If so, Rainey is a genius. He stops in front of you, eyes narrowing. "Is your rope frayed?" he asks. You glance down at the cord, which is, in fact, unraveling slightly at one end. You open your mouth to explain that it was issued that way, but Rainey raises his cane.
Fix it. You want the block sliding backward and crushing your friend's toes? You nod quickly. Yes, no. I'll fix it. Rennie walks away, muttering again. Rope care. Basic stuff. If it's frayed, you're not paid. You don't think that's true. You've never been paid in anything other than food, shelter, and back pain. But you untie the knot and begin rewrapping the end of the rope anyway, looping the fibers tightly and pressing them down with your thumbs. You've learned not to argue. Rennie has the ears of the scribes, and the scribes have the ears of the royal engineers, and the royal engineers have pointy shoes and long memories. Someone nearby sighs loudly. You glance over to see one of your fellow haulers, Kebby, sitting on a rock, holding his ankle. "Twisted it again," he says. You sit down beside him, ignoring the sting of the sand on your legs. "Didn't you do that last week?" Kebby nods. "Different ankle, new experience." You both laugh, and it's the kind of laugh that doesn't require joy, just shared exhaustion. He pulls off his sandal, winces, and holds up his foot. It's swollen slightly, red around the arch. Not broken, but enough to make every step miserable. A medic walks by, hears the word twisted, and detours toward you. This medic, Pekeru, is a man of many smells and few tools. His satchel is a mix of linen wraps, dried herbs, suspicious powders, and things he swears are not just ground-up beetles. Pekeru kneels, examines Kebby's foot, and immediately starts muttering incantations under his breath. He's not sure if he's praying for healing or patience. "This will help," he says, and pulls out what looks like a garlic paste mixed with, yep, you guessed it, sand. Kebby winces. "That looks chunky." "Sacred preparation," Pekeru says. "Passed down through generations." "Of who? Torturers?" Pekeru grins and smears it onto the ankle anyway. Kebby yelps, and a nearby group of workers applaud sarcastically. You glance at Pekeru's necklace, a crocodile tooth on a string. He swears it grants healing power. Others say it's just something he found during a latrine break. Either way, it seems to give him confidence. "Wrap it tight, keep off it for a bit," Pekeru says, finishing the bandage with a neat knot. "Can I skip the next block?" "No," Rennie's voice answers from 50 feet away, without even turning around. The man has ears like a hawk. The crew groans. You stand again and get back to your rope. But now your mind drifts. You start wondering how much of this is ever recorded.
Are you just another faceless worker in the dusty scroll of time? Or does someone somewhere remember you? There's a scribe nearby. He's seated beneath a linen canopy, legs crossed, writing something down with incredible focus and a quill of blackened reed. His name is Bennu. He's never lifted a black in his life, but his scrolls are pristine and his ink never smudges. Some say he writes poetry in the margins. Others say he makes tally marks and guesses at worker lifespans. You inch closer during a break and peer at the tablet. It says, Block 2832. Delivered. Rope rewrapped. Worker limping. Foreman agitated. You blink. That's you. All of it. Captured in ink and clay. You wonder, will this tablet end up in a scroll room beneath the temple? Will someone read it 1,000 years from now and say, yes, the day Rennie was agitated. A classic. It's comforting, in a weird way. You get back to work. The day drags, as it always does. The sun is relentless, and your body aches in places you didn't know had names. But your foreman is yelling a little less now, and Bennu hasn't written collapse imminent next to your name. So that's progress. The sand shifts beneath your sandals as you pull another block. Your back bowed like a papyrus reed in the wind. It's not elegant. It's not glorious. But it's real. You hear someone nearby singing, a low, rhythmic tune, barely audible over the scraping and groaning of the sleds. Others join in, and the melody spreads like cool water through cracked earth. It's not a formal song, just a shared chant, nonsense syllables and long vowels timed to your steps. Pull, step, hum, breathe. Rennie says nothing. He just listens. For once, even he seems content. You finish the haul, the block drops into place with a soft thud, and for a moment you just stand there, chest heaving, dust in your mouth, arms trembling. You glance at the rising pyramid, its edges sharp against the blinding sky. Still incomplete, still impossible, and yet, one block closer. You wipe your brow, you smile, you survive.
You stare at the block. It's finally in place, which means it's time to do it all over again. The next granite beast looms nearby, a monument to human suffering, just waiting to be dragged up the ramp like a very uncooperative guest of honor. You sigh, roll your shoulders, and grab the rope once more. It's still warm from the last haul, comforting and deeply depressing. This time it's a team of 12. The block is longer, heavier, and, if you had to guess, slightly angrier. It looks smug, like it knows it's going to break at least one toe by sundown. Form up, someone calls. You line up, back in place, palms against the rough, fibrous rope. The ramp ahead gleams under the noonday sun, shimmering with that familiar mirage of cool water that absolutely does not exist. You imagine a massive hand tipping the whole world backward and letting the pyramid slide into the Nile like an unwanted plate at a banquet. Ready? The pole leader shouts. Not really. Heave! And off you go. The rock doesn't move. Heave again! It creeps forward with the stubbornness of a hungover ox. The friction is worse this time. Someone forgot to wet the sand properly. You can feel the resistance in every tendon, every creaking joint. One of the guys behind you mutters, "This thing's got the soul of a hippo." You wheeze out a laugh. A dead hippo. Heave. Your feet find no purchase. The sand under your sandals slides, giving you all the support of wet bread. You mentally apologize to your ancestors for whatever bad decision led you to this life. Again! You dig your heels in. The muscles in your thighs scream like panicked cats. You're definitely going to feel this later, assuming you don't fall face first into the ramp and get trampled by the guy behind you, which, statistically, has happened before. Historians still argue whether ancient Egyptian labor teams were rotated for rest
or if it was more of a work until you drop and then just push you to the side kind of situation. Judging by the number of men you've seen napping face down in the sand, you lean toward the latter.
Finally, the sled hits a groove in the ramp and gains momentum. The block glides, relatively speaking. You move in rhythm now, legs pumping, arms trembling, sweat pouring in rivulets down your spine. You begin to hum again. So does someone else. Then the guy next to him joins in. Before long, the whole crew is chanting low, breathy syllables timed to the pull. It's hypnotic, a lullaby of pain and persistence. Pull, step, pull, step. Your mind starts to drift. You think of water, cool, sweet water with no sand in it. Water that doesn't come from a goat skin and tastes like it sat too close to a camel. You imagine it in a ceramic cup, handed to you by a priest in a temple courtyard, shaded by fig trees. You don't even like figs, but they sound fancy right now. Left, left. You snap back to reality just in time to veer slightly left, guiding the sled toward the curve in the ramp. A man on the corner waves a bright cloth to signal the change in direction. He's barefoot, shirtless, and chewing on a stalk of something bitter. Probably regrets. You make the turn. Barely. Then the block catches. The sled halts. Momentum dies. Everyone groans. Who tripped it? Wasn't me. Sand clumped. The sand clumped. The foreman arrives instantly, face set to boiling. He examines the tracks, taps the sled with his reed cane, then points to the friction sand team, two younger boys with oversized jars and guilty expressions. Water, now. They run, sloshing water over the sand and smoothing it with crude paddles made from palm fronds. You take the chance to collapse onto the nearest rock and pretend you've been meditating. The guy next to you fans himself with his tunic. This is why I should have become a potter. You nod. Or a scribe. Or dead. That one gets a laugh. It's dark, but it's real. You look out at the endless line of blocks, all waiting to be hauled, nudged, nudged again, and then finally parked into place like some cosmic punishment. Each one shaped by stonemasons down at the quarry, fine fellows who spend their days chiseling and complaining about how no one appreciates their angles. Funny thing, many still think the stones were cut by slaves under the lash. But that's not really true. You're not a slave. You're just a poor guy with debts, a family, and a distinct lack of better options.
Most of the workers here are free men, conscripts, seasonal laborers, or folks like you trying to earn their rations. The pharaoh pays in bread and beer, lots of beer, which sounds fun until you realize that's basically your salary and your hydration plan. You remember last week when someone calculated they'd drunk the equivalent of an entire goat's weight in beer over the past month. The goat did not consent to be used in this metaphor. "All right, back on it," someone shouts. You rise slowly, joints crackling like old papyrus. The sand's been smoothed, the sled is ready. You grab the rope again, hands now wrapped in thin strips of linen to guard against the worst of the burns. Not that it helps much. The linen just turns into a damp noodle by mid-morning. Heave! And once more, you're moving. The ramp gets steeper the higher you go. The pyramid looms beside you now, its steps like giant teeth biting into the sky. The very idea that this will one day be smooth and white and gleaming is hard to fathom. You've seen polished casing stones in the workshops. Fine stuff, all straight lines and gentle curves. But up here, it's just dust, sweat, and sunburn. "Keep moving!" someone shouts. Your legs go numb. Your back decides to form its own labor union and files a complaint with your spine. But you reach the top of the ramp. The block slides into place. There's a pause, a collective sigh, then applause. Mock applause, of course, but still satisfying. Only 1,000 more to go, someone shouts. Halfway there! Don't say that, you mutter. It jinxes the sun. And right on cue, a cloud passes over the sun. Everyone freezes. Shadows fall across the worksite. Cool, fleeting, perfect shadows. You look up, half expecting to see a miracle, but it's just one cloud. It lingers for precisely 32 seconds before moving on like a bored noble. The sun returns, hotter than ever, almost offended you thought you could escape. Thanks, Ra, someone mutters sarcastically. You wipe your forehead with your sleeve. The sweat smears into a fine layer of brick-colored sludge. Congratulations, you're now wearing the pyramid. Your team disperses briefly. Water skins are passed around. Bread is nibbled. One man lies on his back and sings an ode to his sandals, which he's decided are cursed. Another tries to trade a garlic clove for a date and is met with laughter. There's a quiet moment as you sit on a block, staring out over the desert. So much sand, so much sky. And right in between, your block. One more. One more toward the impossible.
Lunch arrives, not with a bell or a break in the sky, but with the slow realization that your stomach has begun trying to digest itself out of sheer boredom. There's no official midday horn, just the subtle cues of workers slowing down, foremen shouting less, and a distinct smell of onions drifting through the air like a greasy, pungent invitation. You gather near the base of the ramp, where the shade is marginally more generous thanks to a strategically draped linen tarp that is barely clinging to life in the breeze. The sun, of course, is still doing its part, casting down beams of light with the vengeful focus of a disappointed god. It bounces off limestone chips and reflects straight into your eye like some divine interrogation lamp. You squint, sit cross-legged in the sand, and reach for your rations. Ah, yes. Today's lunch, half a flat loaf of bread that's harder than your bed, a handful of dried lentils, and your old friend, onion. The onion is the centerpiece of the meal, pungent enough to clear a nose, and if weaponized properly, ruin a marriage. But it's food, and it's free. You chew slowly, reminding yourself not to inhale too deeply lest you trigger a coughing fit and spray crumbs across your neighbor. Beside you, Hori, one of the older workers, face wrinkled like an old map, picks at his bread with exaggerated sorrow. I swear this used to be softer when the pharaoh was younger. You chuckle through a mouthful of onion. The pharaoh's younger than you. Exactly. He doesn't remember when bread had flavor. You both laugh. Hori offers you a sip of beer from his clay cup. It's warm, flat, and slightly gritty, as though someone rinsed it through sand before serving. But it's beer, brewed thick with barley and date remnants, rich in calories, and just alcoholic enough to take the edge off your growing sunstroke. Historians still debate whether this ancient beer was deliciously nutritious or barely palatable sludge. To you, it's both. You sip, grimace, and pass it back. Someone starts whistling, a strange sound in this world of grunts and chants. It's not melodic, just a rhythm to break the monotony. A few others clap along. Before long, there's a full-on beatbox of ancient proportions echoing under the top, complete with chest thumps and foot slaps. You don't join in. Your energy is reserved for chewing and trying not to faint. As you gnaw at the final bite of bread, which, at this point, could legally be classified as weapon, you notice the flies. They've arrived like honored guests, buzzing with enthusiasm and zero regard for your personal space. One lands on your forehead. You swat. It returns. You swat again. This continues for several minutes until you finally surrender and begin a slow, meditative wave pattern with your hand that accomplishes nothing but looks vaguely ceremonial. Kibi, still limping from his earlier injury, sits beside you, eating his lunch one lentil at a time. I heard there's a guy in the West Village who makes honey cakes. You pause mid-chew. Honey cakes? Yeah, dates, honey, flour, maybe some magic.
charges extra for the magic. You lean back on your elbows. If I ever see one of those, I'm quitting. Just gonna eat it, then retire. Kibi nods solemnly. That's a good plan. The sun shifts, and the brief patch of shade you were enjoying slinks away like a lazy cat. You're back in the light. The radiant, judgmental, utterly exhausting light. Your skin is already tight from the sun, browned, cracked at the edges, and permanently dusted with a fine sheen of limestone. You scratch at your arm and create a small cloud. Somewhere inside your nostrils, a new civilization of dust is forming. They will likely build their own pyramid soon. A distant shout signals the end of the lunch break, but no one moves right away. There's a collective inertia, as if everyone is trying to will the sun to cool or time to pause. Hori sighs and begins to stand, knees creaking like a wooden sailboat. You follow suit, joints groaning in protest. As you gather your tools, a rope frayed at one end, a dull chisel you don't remember borrowing, you notice a small lizard watching you from a nearby rock. Its head bobs slightly, eyes blinking slowly, as if judging your choices. I know, you mutter. I could have been a basket weaver.
The lizard flicks its tail and scurries away. You trudge back toward the worksite, stomach moderately full, brain moderately active, and spirit mildly dented. The crew is forming ranks again near the ramp. A new block has arrived. Sand still wet beneath it, sled marks crisp and recent. It's smaller than the last one. That's either a blessing or a trick. You can't tell yet. Rini, your beloved foreman, is once again pacing the perimeter like a lion in a tiny cage. He's already shouting, which means lunch did nothing to improve his mood. Back straight, rope high, I don't want to see any slack. You consider pointing out that the rope is slack because you haven't started pulling yet, but then remembered the last guy who made that joke had to scrub latrine buckets with a broken seashell for 2 days. So instead, you nod. Beside you, Kebi huffs. Only 5 more hours. Don't say that, you mutter. The sun hears things. The afternoon sun is no gentler than the morning one. In fact, it seems meaner now, closer even, as if Ra himself has leaned down to inspect your work personally and found it wanting. You take your place on the rope, feet braced, fingers wrapped tight. Heave! And off you go again. This time the sled moves easier. Maybe it's the smaller block, maybe it's the better sand, or maybe your body has simply accepted its fate and stopped complaining. You glance sideways at the horizon. The pyramid looms as always, a monument to things far bigger than you. Yet here you are, another ant hauling another crumb toward the mountain. Historians still argue whether the workers believed in the divine purpose of their labor, or if they just saw it as a paycheck with a sunburn. You suspect it's a bit of both. There's something oddly comforting about building something you'll never see completed. It removes the pressure of expectations. Think the pharaoh will visit again? Someone asks behind you. You snort. Only if the fig harvest fails and he needs to feel superior. The chant begins again. Voices low, steady, humming with rhythm and resignation. Pull, step, pull, step. Your lunch sits heavily in your belly, forming a warm lump that shifts every time you lean forward. But you keep going. There's no other option. No magic spell, no hidden elevator. Just your hands, your rope, your team, and your very questionable life choices. Eventually, the block reaches its resting place. Another one done. Another stone laid into the dream of a king. You exhale, forehead glistening, back aching, and mouth dry. But you smile anyway. Because somewhere out there, maybe, just maybe, that guy with the honey cakes is real. And tomorrow, you might find him.
You don't get much of a say in where you're assigned for the afternoon, and fate, or perhaps Rennie's sense of humor, has decided you'll be working near the scribes today. There's a curious hierarchy here on the Pyramid Project. On one side, you've got workers like you, sun-soaked, dust-coated, constantly one bad sandal away from a sprained ankle. On the other, you have the scribes, men in crisp linen who never seem to sweat and always seem to be writing something vaguely ominous on papyrus. You settle onto a stone block near their little setup. The scribes sit under a low canopy stretched between two wooden poles, its shade barely wide enough to cover the backs of their necks. Yet they lounge like cats in a palace, legs crossed, styluses dancing across scrolls as they murmur to one another with the calm assurance of people whose biggest occupational hazard is a paper cut. You begin stacking smaller limestone bricks beside the work ramp. Busy work, really. The sort of job that must be done but doesn't require pulling stones or testing the limits of human endurance. A welcome change. It's a task that lets your hands work while your ears wander. The lead scribe, a thin man with a nose like a hawk's beak and the posture of a reed, gestures to his assistant. "That man there, what's his number?" His assistant, barely more than a boy with a bowl haircut and the bored expression of someone dreaming about a different life, squints at you. 1725. The lead scribe nods and writes something with a flourish. You can't see what it is, but you assume it's something flattering like stacked bricks with moderate enthusiasm, or not actively sabotaging project. You cough, theatrically. "You writin' poetry about me?" The assistant glances up. "Just inventory." "Ah," you say. "Romantic." You return to stacking, but your eyes keep drifting to their work. You've always been a little envious of scribes. They hold the magic of words, actual symbols that mean things. They record the gods, the laws, the debts, the food shipments. They can make a name eternal or erase a man from history with a single line of ink. You think, not for the first time, how different your life might have been if you'd learned to read. Not that your family could afford a tutor. Reading was a luxury for those born without calluses. You, on the other hand, were born holding a shovel.
Still, you watch the scribes and imagine. One of them leans over and dips his reed into an inkwell, then scribbles across the parchment with a sigh that suggests deep creative fatigue, though he's probably just copying numbers from a list. Historians still argue whether pyramid scribes were respected bureaucrats or merely glorified bean counters with nice handwriting. From where you're standing, back sore, knuckles bleeding, sweat pouring, they might as well be gods. You pause your stacking and stretch your back. "You ever carry a brick?" you ask the assistant scribe. He doesn't look up. "I carried one once when I was 12. "Huh," you say. "Did it traumatize you?" He smiles faintly. "No, but I wrote about it in my apprenticeship scroll." You nod solemnly. "Let me guess. A Boy and the Brick, a tale of endurance." "The brick taught me discipline. 3 lines of moral reflection. That brick's done more for you than my entire career." He finally laughs, a genuine one, soft and brief, like a hiccup of amusement. You return to work, lifting a freshly cut limestone piece and fitting it against the ramp base. Your muscles grumble, but it's a dull ache now, more a background hum than a shout. The scribes are now arguing over grain tallies. Apparently someone ate more than their allocated ration last week, and the scrolls don't match up. It's the ancient version of office drama, with slightly more math and significantly less eye contact. "Are you saying the baker is lying?" the lead scribe says, his voice rising. "I'm saying the numbers don't lie," the assistant mutters. You quietly mouth the phrase, enjoying how serious it sounds. The numbers don't lie. It sounds like a curse, or maybe a prophecy. Eventually, a runner approaches, barefoot, lean, carrying a satchel slung over one shoulder.
he delivers a new scroll to the lead scribe, who scans it with a frown. "Well," the scribe says, "looks like we're behind." You look up. "Behind? How can we be behind? This place is made of rocks. Rocks don't expire." He doesn't respond, but the assistant scribe offers a shrug. The pharaoh wants progress. Of course he does. The pharaoh, may he live forever, likely imagines the pyramid builds itself while he sips lotus wine and practices eyeliner application. You glance at the enormous structure rising behind you. The ramp stretches further now, climbing higher, steeper. Each block placed is another tiny victory, another act of faith that this absurdly giant triangle will one day gleam in the sun and make someone feel immortal.
You wonder if your name is written down anywhere. Probably not. Maybe just your number. 1725. Like a grain sack or a goat. Still, better than nothing. "Hey," you say to the assistant scribe, "think you could sneak my name onto one of those scrolls, just once?" He raises an eyebrow. "What for?" "Legacy," you reply dramatically. "One day, some future scribe will read it and wonder who I was. Maybe think I was important." He considers it. "What's your name?" You tell him. He nods, then writes something down, not on the scroll, but on a scrap piece. "No promises," he says, tucking it into his belt. It's probably a joke, or maybe he'll use it as fire starter later. But for a brief moment, you imagine your name surviving past the dust, past the stones, past the beer rations and sunburns. The day creeps on. You finish the stacking. You carry a few more bricks. You listen to the scribes argue, record, recalculate. At one point, the assistant scribe stands up, stretches his back, and groans. "How do you people do this all day?" You smile. "Same way you do, one mark at a time." He nods, clearly aching after just a minute on his feet. "Respect." It's a small exchange, a nod across a chasm, but it feels like something. As the sun dips lower and the shadows lengthen, you finish your last task and sit for a moment, watching the scribes pack their tools. The lead scribe wraps his scrolls in linen, careful and precise. The assistant gathers the ink and styluses, still humming a tune from earlier. You think for a moment that if you had been born into his world, you might have loved it. The quiet, the words, the precision. But then again, you also would have missed the songs, the sweat, the shared grumbling, and the inexplicable joy of seeing a block finally slide into place after an hour of agony. You stand, brush the sand from your knees, and head back toward your team, where Rini is already barking about the next shift. The scribes don't wave goodbye, but the assistant nods as you pass, and tucked behind his belt, you think you see the corner of that scrap with your name still on it.
There's a sort of myth that passes among the workers, part joke, part lament, part whispered prayer under the sun, that one day the pharaoh himself might arrive at the worksite and, upon seeing your sweat-soaked brow and perfectly aligned limestone block, instantly promote you to some prestigious role in the palace. Perhaps keeper of the royal toenail clippers, or supreme overseer of decorative basket weaving. It doesn't really matter. The point is, anything that doesn't involve rope burns and sunstroke. And then, one morning, it happened. Well, happened might be too generous a word. Unfolded with a great deal of overcompensated pomp and very little consequence might be closer. Your mid-task, back bent at a painful angle as you attempt to adjust the misaligned sled track with your foot, an art form that requires precision, balance, and no small amount of frustration, when the murmurs begin to ripple through the ranks like flies over spilled beer. He's here. Who? The pharaoh. You straighten up too quickly, nearly toppling into the stone pile. Around you, workers are already half-heartedly brushing sand from their chests, trying to stand taller, arrange their tools in aesthetically pleasing ways. One man starts humming a patriotic hymn then promptly forgets the words and devolves into rhythmic coughing. The foremen snap into action. Rennie, of course, is suddenly all smiles and smooth posture, shouting in a tone that somehow manages to be both urgent and worshipful. Eyes up! Work with dignity! Pretend you care! And then you see it. A dust cloud on the horizon. A royal procession of about 12 men and 2 gold-covered donkeys, flanked by flag bearers and parasol holders. The parasols are the real stars here. Wide circles of fabric embroidered with lotus flowers, each one casting a dappled bit of shade over someone who probably doesn't need it. You can almost feel the parasol's mockery on your face, which has long since fused into a single, sunburned shade of mild regret. The pharaoh himself rides in a litter carried by 4 unfortunate but exceptionally muscular men. He reclines on a cushion that looks far too soft for this world, dressed in layered linens so white you wonder if they bleached them with moonlight. He does not wave, he does not speak, he does not even glance in your direction. He is the human embodiment of divine disinterest. You and your team freeze in a half-crouched, semi-functional tableau of labor, a brick balanced in your hands, a chisel held mid-air like a conductor's baton. The man beside you, who just moments ago had a finger up his nose, now looks like a statue dedicated to industry. The pharaoh's eyes pass over the ramp, the workers, the pyramid's grand silhouette behind you. And then he gestures, not dramatically, not even with conviction, just a lazy flick of the wrist. A royal attendant steps forward, carefully pulls a scroll from a bag, unrolls it, and begins to read. It's not a speech, not even an inspiring edict. It's numbers, quotas, an announcement that construction is on pace, that the gods are pleased, and that grain rations will continue at current levels. You blink. That's it? Historians still argue whether these royal visits were spiritual blessings, political inspections, or just particularly elaborate ways to break up the king's afternoon boredom. Whatever the truth, the result is the same. You're still standing in sand, holding a brick, waiting for something meaningful to happen.
And then it does. The pharaoh sneezes. It's a tiny, delicate thing, almost adorable, the kind of sneeze that might earn polite applause at a high society dinner. Immediately, 3 attendants spring into action. One offers a perfumed cloth, another holds up a golden bowl, a third drops to his knees, perhaps just in case the sneeze was a divine omen. You exchange glances with Kebi. He raises an eyebrow, then whispers, "I sneezed twice yesterday and nobody even noticed." You smirk. Maybe your sneeze wasn't sanctioned by the sun god. Rude. Eventually, the litter turns. The pharaoh departs. His procession exits the way it came, trailed by a cloud of glittering dust and the long sighs of laborers who had hoped for something, anything, other than being treated like part of the scenery. Still, it does shake up the day. For the next hour, the work site is abuzz with commentary. I saw him blink. He has eyeliner thicker than my wife's. His donkey had golden hooves. One man insists that the pharaoh glance directly at him and mouth the words, "You're doing great." No one believes him. Even Rennie relaxes after a while, muttering about how these visits are always more trouble than they're worth. "Do you know how long it took me to get the decorative flag up?" He grumbles, gesturing toward a now limp piece of cloth tied to a stick. Work resumes. The sun does not care that a god king briefly blessed the site with his presence. The stone is still heavy. The sand is still hot. Your hands are still blistered. But something odd lingers in the air. A sense of strange unity. A shared experience. You were all there when it happened. You all saw the royal parasols. You all inhaled the same ceremonial incense dust that now scratches the back of your throat like an overly ambitious spice. Later that day, during your water break, which is more of a try not to faint while sipping from a warm jug break, You find yourself reenacting the moment for a younger worker who missed the spectacle. He had rings on every finger, each one bigger than my thumb. Did he speak? No, but his nose said everything. The boy nods solemnly, eyes wide. And just like that, the legend begins. By nightfall, the story has evolved. Now the pharaoh supposedly levitated a few inches off his litter. One of the donkeys apparently wept tears of gold. The numbers on the scroll are rumored to contain a secret code predicting the flood cycles for the next decade. You lie on your mat, watching the stars blink into view, and wonder if this is how stories begin, one royal sneeze at a time. There's a certain comfort in it, knowing that you were there, that you saw it, that you, brick stacker and beer drinker, witnessed something that will be talked about long after your bones are dust and your sandals are part of some museum's floor display. Historians may one day find records of a pharaoh's visit to the pyramid site and ponder the significance of his presence, the grandeur of his arrival, the purpose behind his strange silence. They'll write long papers and argue at long conferences about what it all meant. But you'll always know it meant nothing, and also, somehow, everything. Because for one shining, sun-drenched moment, you weren't just hauling stones. You were part of the story.
It happens right after you stub your toe on the edge of a sled rail. A sharp little yelp escapes your mouth, not dramatic, but enough for Kebi to snort and say, "That's what you get for walking like an ostrich." You're too busy hobbling to offer a witty reply. Still, you trudge along, the pain in your toe fading into the greater tapestry of aches that your body has been accumulating since sunrise. And then, as if summoned by the universe's impeccable comic timing, your foot slips on a stone chip and you tumble with all the grace of a sack of lentils down a small mound of compacted earth. You land elbow first in gravel. The impact sends a jolt up your arm, one that crackles through your shoulder and leaves your fingers tingling like a badly tuned harp. You lie there for a moment, staring up at the blinding sky, squinting through dust and the faint sensation of your own dignity leaking into the sand. Kebi appears above you, upside down from your angle, munching on a date. "You good?" "I think the pyramid just attacked me," you mutter. "Right, I'll go get the medic." Oh no, the medic. You'd almost prefer to walk it off with a limp and some pride, but the system is the system, and once you've gone horizontal in front of witnesses, protocol kicks in. 15 minutes later, you're sitting on an overturned water jar beneath a crooked palm sapling, cradling your arm while awaiting the arrival of the man known to most as Scarab, a nickname that no one dares use in front of him. His real name is Neferhotep, but to the workers, he's simply the guy who smells like turmeric and has a pouch full of questionable ointments and a disturbing fondness for crocodile-shaped amulets. You hear him before you see him. The telltale clink of ceramic vials, the shuffle of bare feet in worn leather sandals, the soft humming of a song that, based on the notes, might be about fermentation. "Where's the corpse?" he says as he arrives, adjusting a strap that keeps his bundle of salves from swinging too wildly. "Not a corpse, just a bit of elbow vengeance." He squints at you, then at your arm. "You didn't twist it the sacred way, did you?" "I tripped." "Ah," he grunts, as if this confirms something deep and philosophical about the human condition. "That's how they get you." You consider asking who they are, but decide against it. You've heard his explanations before, and they tend to involve snakes, stars, and once a theory about angry dust spirits who hate kneecaps. Neferhotep squats beside you and begins unpacking his kit. Out comes a small clay jar of resin, a strip of linen already stained from a previous injury, hopefully not fatal, and a small bone tool that might have once belonged to a gazelle. He pokes gently at your elbow, frowning. "See, if you were noble-born, you'd have a better elbow angle. Yours is a laborer's elbow, highly susceptible to gravel curses. You try to smile. Can you uncurse it? I'll try, as he smears something cool and sticky over your skin. It smells faintly of honey and strongly of onions. Is that? Bee saliva mash, she says proudly, mixed with crushed lotus root. Very sacred, very expensive, or it would be if I paid for it.
You decide it's best not to ask. As he wraps the linen tightly around your elbow, he hums again. You find the sound oddly calming, sleepy even, like a lullaby that got distracted and wandered off halfway through the melody. Now, he says, standing up and brushing off his knees, you'll want to rest that arm for at least, he pauses, considering, 5 minutes. You blink. 5? 5.5 if you're feeling rebellious. Great. He slaps the pouch closed, then hands you something from his bundle, a small charm made of baked clay, shaped vaguely like a frog but with too many legs. Protection, he explains. From what? Unspecified threats. You nod. Somehow that feels on brand for today. Historians still argue whether ancient medics like Neferhotep were true practitioners of early science or simply well-meaning men with access to herbs and the confidence of someone who once read a scroll upside down and decided it meant he should boil garlic in wine. Whatever the case, you're grateful, even if the wrap is itchy and smells a bit like moldy bread. As Neferhotep leaves, off to check on a man who claims to have swallowed a pebble during lunch, you remain seated in the thin shade. Workers pass by with sleds, ropes, and loud opinions about tool storage. Kebi tosses you a flatbread as he walks by. You get a day off for that? He calls. Only if my elbow starts reciting spells. He laughs, and the moment softens. You nibble the bread and watch the clouds drift lazily overhead. They're wispy today, like the gods decided to dab the sky with a wet brush and then wandered off to do something more exciting. The breeze shifts, and you catch the scent of Neferhotep's ointments lingering in the air. Bitter, earthy, strangely sweet. You close your eyes for a moment and breathe it in. It's not unpleasant, just complex. Like everything else in this strange, sunburned life. You think about the charm in your hand. You've seen men wear these things around their necks, tucked into waistbands, hung from rafters above sleeping mats. You've also seen them tossed into fire pits when someone decides that yesterday's luck wasn't good enough to justify today's burden. Still, you slip it into your pouch. Unspecified protection might be exactly what you need. Eventually, the foreman wanders over, not Rennie, thankfully, but an older man with a face like dried papyrus and a voice like a shovel dragged over rock. You alive? Mostly. Can you lift a block? Which arm? He squints at the bandage, shrugs. Good enough. And just like that, you're back on your feet. Not fully healed, not fully rested, but no one expects you to be. Work doesn't stop for bruises. It pauses just long enough to acknowledge them, and then expects you to carry the bruises with grace and a semi-decent attitude. You rejoin the team and resume hauling. A little slower, a little stiffer, but still moving. Still building. Still here. There's a lull in the labor as the sun edges past its cruelest point in the sky. You find yourself hauling rope alongside Kebi again, the two of you wedged between a creaking wooden sled and the grumbling complaints of the man behind you, who insists that his sandals are cursed. Maybe they are. One has been flopping with a strange rhythm all day, like it's trying to send a distress signal. It's during these slower moments, the inch-by-inch dragging of stone up the ramp, when conversation is one of the few things lighter than the block itself, that gossip begins to bubble up like a simmering stew left too long in the sun. Did you hear about Senusret? Kebi asks, eyes fixed on the dusty horizon as he leans into the rope. What about him? Caught stealing grain from the foreman's tent. You arch an eyebrow. Again? He says it was an accident. How do you accidentally steal grain? He claimed the sack fell onto his shoulder and he panicked. Panicked it all the way home? Exactly. There's a chuckle from the man dragging beside you, a leathery worker with 3 missing teeth and the eternal expression of someone mildly unimpressed with life. Senusret's been panicking his way into food since the dry season. You all laugh, but the mood isn't cruel. Gossip here isn't sharp. It's soft-edged, almost affectionate. A way to pass time, to make the wait seem less important than the words floating above it. As the block groans its way upward, you overhear another group not far behind, their conversation louder, more animated. I swear by Ra's left sandal she was dancing with the priest's cousin. No! Yes! But he's got a lazy eye and breath like a fish pond. That's why they kept the lights low. This prompts a series of guffaws, interrupted only by a minor stumble from one man, whose sled rope slips from his hands and sends a small cascade of sand flying up into his own face. His muffled curses earn more laughter. The pyramid may be rising stone by stone, but it's the chatter, light, ridiculous, endlessly repeating, that holds the place together. And it's not all flirtation and stolen grain. Sometimes it turns to stranger things. I heard, someone whispers near the base of the quarry ramp, that the foremen are hiding treasure inside the pyramid. You glance back, not to see who said it, but to check if anyone's taking it seriously. They are. There's a sealed chamber already built, with chests of gold and amulets blessed by 6 priests. I heard one of them gave a goat a new tail. Kebi leans over. If you ever wonder how history becomes mythology, it's because someone gives a goat a spare tail. You smirk. Imagine future scholars trying to make sense of that. Historians still argue whether the workers truly believed in the magical properties of their labor, or if they simply wove myths to cope with the heat and repetition. The line between sacred truth and sweaty daydream tends to blur somewhere around midday.
Politics, too, has its place on the worksite, albeit in the form of flat, dusty complaints. The new chisel tax is ridiculous, grumbles one of the younger cutters. We have to sign them out, return them, and if they're chipped, they dock your ration, finishes another. Even if the chip was already there. The tools are older than Rennie. Don't let him hear you say that. He'll make you oil his sandals again. You remember that punishment. You still have nightmares about the smell. There's talk of someone trying to organize a petition, a scroll passed hand to hand, asking for better water access closer to the upper levels of the pyramid. But every time it's mentioned, the speaker adds, "Don't tell anyone I said that," as though the breeze itself might carry their words to the ears of the foreman. Of course, even in a desert, whispers travel fast. You pass by a group clustered around a large jug of beer. It's technically a shared break, though unofficial. They pour tiny cups, murmur stories, laugh into their palms. That priest who blesses the tools, someone says, he sleeps during the blessings, just says the first part out loud, and then hums the rest. Another voice chimes in. Doesn't matter, my chisel still snapped yesterday. Maybe I need an unblessing. There's a kind of absurd poetry to it all. Everyone complains. Everyone knows the system is rigged. Everyone participates anyway. And no one's leaving. You too are woven into the fabric of this place, where the air is thick with grit and laughter, and where every man's story includes at least one footnote about an unfortunate encounter with a goat. The gossip rolls into absurdity before long. There's a new supervisor coming next month, tall as 2 camels stacked. He once shouted so loud it caused a minor flood. He can chisel with his mind, and he eats pomegranates whole, no chewing. It's all nonsense, of course, but good nonsense. sleepy nonsense. The kind that numbs your brain just enough to help you forget that you're dragging rocks under a sun that thinks you're a challenge. Still, not every word is spoken in jest. You hear whispers of illness at the workers' village, a boy with fever, a woman who hasn't stood up in 3 days. Nothing confirmed, just murmurs. Neferhotep has been seen more often lately, his bag of charms and foul-smelling potions swinging with extra urgency. No one says the word plague, of course. That would make it real. Instead, they call it the dry cough or temple breath. Euphemisms help everyone sleep better. You glance toward the horizon, where the village sits like a smudge of reeds and clay huts against the desert. Somewhere in there are your neighbors, your friends, your food pot, your future. And as you return to work, the chatter continues, soothing in its rhythm, familiar in its ridiculousness. The day grows later, the shadows lengthen, the sand cools by a single unforgiving degree, but the stories never stop. And as long as they do not, neither do you.
It begins with a sound, a deep, rhythmic thud that echoes across the stone ramp like a slow heartbeat. You feel it through the soles of your feet before you realize what it is. Drums. Not the kind used for rituals or ceremonies. Those are elegant, precise, designed to call gods or impress nobility. No, these are work drums, the kind that beat in time with movement. One thump for lift, another for pull. They're meant to guide teams as they shift the largest blocks up the steep incline toward the pyramid's gleaming heart. You shift your weight forward on the rope. Today, you're on rotation with one of the heavy hauler groups. These aren't your average stone bricks. These are the monsters, each the size of a small boat, hauled on sledges over wet sand, like dragging your entire hut behind you with nothing but sweat and sore optimism. The drum master sits on a raised platform shaded by a fraying canopy, bare-chested, eyes closed, hands moving in a trance. Boom, boom, boom. The sound rolls over you, latching on to the tempo of your breath. It's hypnotic. Somehow it makes the effort feel less like suffering and more like participation in something, what's the word? Orchestrated? The block before you groans like a groggy god as it begins its ascent. You push, you heave, you pray your sandals don't betray you. The drum beat grows louder as the block crests a bend in the ramp. A slip here would mean catastrophe. There's no harness, just the force of 30 men, a prayer, and the stubbornness of Egyptian engineering. Next to you, a man named Asha grits his teeth. I dreamed last night, he says between breaths, that the stone was chasing me. Let me guess, you tripped over your pride? Woke up before I could. Lucky. The drum beat pulses like a stern parent reminding you to keep going. You lean harder into the rope. Sand bites at your shins, your back screams, and yet, somehow, you keep moving. Historians still argue whether the ancient Egyptians used wheels at all during pyramid construction. While carts and chariots existed, no evidence of wheeled transport at these sites has been found. Instead, recent discoveries suggest the use of slickened sand, water poured just enough to reduce friction. It's not glamorous, but it works. Mostly. You glance ahead. Sure enough, a boy scurries forward with a clay pot and dumps a splash across the path. It sinks in quickly, turning dry dust into slick mud. The sledge lurches forward another cubit. And again. And again. Your muscles are jelly, your fingers curl without permission, and yet, through the heat haze, the towering shape of the pyramid grows ever closer. By the time your team reaches the platform, you're coated in a paste of sweat, sand, and whatever that mystery smell is coming from the rope. You collapse beside the block, gasping for air that feels thick and hot like bread left too long in the oven. Cabby wanders over, sipping water from a cracked jug. I thought you were dead, he says, crouching beside you. Dead men don't push rocks uphill. That's not what the priests say. Priests can shove it. Shove what? The next block. He laughs and offers you the jug. You drink deeply,
ignoring the odd aftertaste that suggests this water might have been stored in a pot formerly used for pickled fish. Hydration over hesitation. You lie back, staring up at the endless blue of the sky. It's cloudless, unforgiving, a dome of glass trapping you in a world of repetition and blisters, but also, strangely, of rhythm, of progress. That block is one fewer to haul, one more in place. A small victory in a project that will outlive you by millennia. Kibi taps your shoulder. You know what they say? No, but you're going to tell me. He grins. That each block placed earns a spot for your soul in the field of reeds. You squint. Even if you dropped one. Especially if you dropped it with flair. There's a silence. A warm, tired, contented sort of silence. The kind that comes after surviving something unpleasant. The kind that stretches without awkwardness. Eventually, someone shouts, "Next group!" and you thank every god you've ever heard of that you're not part of it. Instead, you're shuffled off to another duty, block finishing. This job's less dramatic. No ropes, no drums, no acrobatics, but it's delicate. It requires focus. You join a group beneath a slatted wooden awning where partially smooth limestone blocks wait to be prepared for placement. You pick up your chisel, gently scrape at the edge of a block, smoothing it into shape. A soft hiss of stone against stone. It's oddly meditative. Across from you, an old man hums as he works. You've seen him before, one of the few who never complains. He carves with care, almost affection. Each stroke deliberate. Why hum, you ask? Reminds the block that it's going to be beautiful. He smirks. That work on people too? He nods. Sometimes. Your chisel slips slightly, nicking your finger. You hiss and suck on it. The old man offers you a strip of papyrus. For blood or for pride, you ask. For both, he says. As you wrap the tiny cut, you think about the strange tenderness embedded in this violent architecture. You're carving a monument to power, to legacy, to divine ego. But here, in the shadows, it's quiet, careful, human. Asha walks by and taps the block with his knuckle. This one's got good bones. You raise your eyebrow. Stones don't have bones. He shrugs. Maybe this one does. Maybe they all do. Maybe that's the point. Each block contains more than weight. It holds effort, memory, a sliver of the man who moved it, who smoothed it, who laughed and bled and prayed and grumbled into it. By the end of your shift, your back is sore in new ways. Your hands are blistered, but the block is smoother, prettier even. As the sun dips low, painting the desert gold, the air grows softer, cooler. Shadows stretch across the site like lazy gods waking from naps. You gather your tools, brush off the dust, and look up at the pyramid. It's taller now. Not by much, but enough. Enough that you feel it in your chest. Not pride exactly, more like acknowledgement. You were here. You did this. Your sweat is somewhere inside that stone. And tomorrow, you'll do it again. Not because it's easy, but because it matters.
Evening creeps in like a whisper across the stone. The work site doesn't stop exactly, it just softens. The clang of chisels becomes sporadic, the barked orders dissolve into grunts of agreement, and the dust finally begins to settle as if even it, too, is tired of floating. You shuffle toward the edge of the site where the water carriers gather. The sun, while lower, still clings stubbornly to the horizon, casting a syrupy orange glow that glints off the limestone, giving the impression that the pyramid itself is pulsing with light. You pause for a moment to stare. It's annoying, really. how beautiful something can look when it's caused so much pain. Someone hands you a bowl of barley water. It's warm, slightly sour, but you drink it anyway, because that's what's offered, and because hydration, even fermented and questionable, is a gift. Kebby flops beside you on the worn bench, his tunic dark with sweat and streaked with the pale smear of crushed stone dust. Did you hear the latest? You eye him. If this is about Senesret's grain theft again. He shakes his head. No, this one's real. You brace yourself. They found something. In one of the inner chambers, a tunnel that wasn't supposed to be there. You raise an eyebrow. Another secret tomb of a lost pharaoh story? I'm telling you, it was sealed. No air, no light. One of the priests fainted when they opened it. Too much incense. Kebby leans closer, eyes gleaming. No, listen. They said there were paintings on the wall of the stars. You blink. Stars? Like constellations, but not like we know them. Lines and animals and even something that looked like a boat flying through the sky. Flying? He nods, clearly thrilled with the absurdity of it. You sip the barley water slowly. You know, there's a reason people don't let workers near the planning scrolls. But part of you wonders, because frankly, no one knows how many chambers this pyramid actually holds, or how many will be filled in, repurposed, sealed off forever. Historians still argue whether the labyrinthian tunnels beneath the Great Pyramids were functional, symbolic, or simply the result of architectural improvisation taken to extremes. Your rest doesn't last long. Soon, the foremen are calling out names for night watch and torch rotation. The site doesn't sleep, not completely. Even when the blocks aren't moving, there's guard duty, tool accounting, inspection of the haulage ramps. Tonight, you've drawn a relatively merciful shift, lamp carrier. The oil lamps are small, carved from clay with tiny cotton wicks soaked in fish oil. They reek like regret, but burn with a steady flame. Your job is to keep them lit as the overseer does his evening rounds. You cradle the basket of them, replacing any that sputter out or drip onto the wooden support planks.
The walk takes you along the perimeter of the site, past shadows of half-finished scaffolding, dormant tools, and a few sleeping workers curled beneath rough blankets, using rolled tunics as pillows. The overseer you're shadowing is called Henu. He's thin, sharp-nosed, with a gait like a heron on a mission. He doesn't say much. Occasionally he points to something and mutters, "Too loose," or "Fix this tomorrow." But mostly he walks in silence, eyes scanning everything with military precision. You don't mind. The silence is comforting, and there's something magical about the sight under low light. The pyramid no longer looks golden. It's silver now, moon-kissed, cool, less brutal, more mysterious. The shadows are deeper, the edges blurred. Do you ever wonder, you ask Henu, mostly to fill the air, if it will last? He pauses. The pyramid? You nod. He shrugs. Longer than us. Longer than anyone? Another shrug. That's the point. It's not exactly poetic, but it lands with more weight than expected. You relight a sputtering lamp, watching the flame catch with a soft hiss. The oil smokes for a moment, then settles. As you make your way along the eastern slope, a strange sound catches your ear. Not work, not footsteps, not speech. A low whistle, almost melodic. You glance around, then spot the source. A man sitting alone on a high ledge, carved flute pressed to his lips. He plays softly, a tune that meanders like the Nile in flood season. Haunting, lazy, unfinished. You've never seen him before. His clothes mark him as a specialist, probably a scribe or designer, someone too important to sweat, but not important enough to skip night watch. Henu doesn't stop, but you linger for a few seconds, letting the tune curl around you like incense smoke. Later, when the rounds are done, you return your empty lamp basket and step off duty. The path back to the workers' village is quiet. The air is cooler now, tinged with the scent of tamarisk trees and distant cook fires. Someone's roasting onions. Your stomach growls on cue. You pass the edge of the livestock enclosure and hear the low bleating of a restless goat. A dog barks once and is quickly shushed. There's a sense that the entire camp is exhaling, preparing for the small hours where even the dreams get drowsy. Your own mat awaits near the rear of the cluster, woven reeds, flattened out, barely more than a suggestion of bedding, but it's yours. As you lie back, you feel the grit of the day clinging to your skin. Your elbows ache, your toes feel like someone tried to flatten them with a mallet, but you're too tired to care. Above you, stars blink into view one by one. They're brighter here, less competition from torches and temple flames. The Milky Way arcs above, a river of light. You think about the tunnel Kebi mentioned, the star paintings, the strange boat. Maybe someone long ago believed you could sail through the sky after death. Maybe someone still believes it now. You don't, not really. But you do believe in the weight of stone, the rhythm of drums, the smell of oil and dust and barley water. You believe in the pyramid and what it takes to raise it, and that's enough. Your eyes grow heavy. The desert wind rustles the edges of the linen tarp above you. A lizard scurries by your foot, then vanishes into the shadows. And slowly, very slowly, you let yourself drift. Not into dreams, but into the quiet.
Morning comes not with a shout, but with a thud. A dull, familiar knock at the wooden frame of your shelter, followed by a grumbling voice that doesn't bother to enter. Up. Foreman wants all block teams ready before sunrise. We've got visitors. Visitors? That's unusual. You groan, stretch, and immediately regret it. Every muscle in your back protests like it's been asked to do the impossible. Again. You rub the sleep from your eyes, sit up slowly, and take in the dim light beginning to stretch across the camp. The sky is still more indigo than blue, and the morning stars are only reluctantly beginning to fade. A thin ribbon of mist curls along the edge of the Nile, miles in the distance, but close enough that it lends the morning a dampness not typically found in desert living. It clings to your skin, whispering promises of sweat yet to come. You step outside and notice the shift immediately. The usual relaxed shuffling of sleepy workers is now a brisker sort of half-march. Torches still flicker on the ramps, but more of them have been lit. Some effort has been made to line up the tools in a neat row, an absurdity if you know how often they get borrowed and lost. Kebi passes by with a half-eaten fig. Guess who's coming? The prince, you guess, brushing sand from your tunic? Worse, priests. Plural? He nods. With scrolls and feathers. You know the type. Indeed you do. The kind that arrive with perfume in their hair and divine wisdom in their eyes. Somehow always 3 steps removed from actual labor. They bring omens, instructions, blessings, rarely clarity, and usually more work. Today, their goal seems to be to realign the causeway. Something about celestial misalignment, an eclipse, a disagreement between Orion's belt and the king's sandals. Historians still argue whether these realignments were spiritually inspired or simply a polite way for architects to correct the miscalculation without losing their heads. You don't know which it is. All you know is that the block you spent half a day hauling yesterday, it now has to be moved 1 cubit to the left. 1 cubit. You stare at it for a moment, hoping the block will grow legs and move itself. It doesn't. It's still just a block. Silent, smug, immovable. So, you get to work. The foremen bark instructions. The priests hover nearby, occasionally pointing at the sky or muttering about shadow length. One of them carries a bronze mirror and keeps angling it toward the sun, watching the reflections play across the pyramid's smooth upper casing. Does it have to be exactly 1 cubit? Someone mutters behind you. Would you like to ask the divine geometry team yourself? Comes the dry reply.
The team reassembles. Ropes are repositioned. Sand is dampened. The drums resume their patient thudding, and you, once again, lean your shoulder into inevitability. It's hard not to resent the priests. Their linen is whiter than yours, their fingers uncalloused. One carries a scroll so long it drags in the dust.
the edge slowly fraying as he glides from group to group with theatrical solemnity. Still, there's something mesmerizing about the way they work, tracing diagrams, marking angles, invoking the gods with such confidence you almost believe they have them on retainer. One young priest, clearly newer than the rest, looks more curious than holy. He watches you closely, as though trying to memorize the rhythm of your movement. Eventually he approaches. "Do you ever talk to the blocks?" he asks, tentatively. You blink. "Talk to them?" He nods. "They say each one must be placed with intention. I'm trying to understand what that feels like." You shrug. "Mostly it feels like back pain." "But there's rhythm, right? Purpose?" You glance at the block you're guiding. It's tilted slightly. The sand underneath is compacting unevenly. You signal for a pause, wedge a sliver of wood beneath one corner, and gently nudge it until it levels. "There's something like that," you admit. "A sort of dialogue, but it's mostly one-sided." He smiles and scribbles something on his scroll. "Thank you." You don't respond, but when you resume pushing, your hands feel just a little more deliberate, a little more priestly, if such a thing can be said about a laborer covered in dust and sweat. By mid-morning, the adjustment is complete. The priests bless the new alignment, a foreman offers a wearied nod of approval, and just like that, the block is declared sacred again. You slump against it, utterly spent. A short while later, you're sent down to the lower quarry for tool collection. It's a less glamorous errand, but you welcome the change in pace. The quarry has its own rhythm, less structured, more echoey. Stonecutters work in jagged intervals and the air rings with the percussion of mallets on granite. You pass one man using a copper chisel and a stone hammer to split a block along a fault line. He's muttering to himself in a sing-song tone as though coaxing the stone apart. "Been talking to that one since dawn," he tells you without looking up. "She's stubborn." "She?" He grins. You give them names, they behave better. You gather a bundle of chisels, dull, dented, waiting for resharpening, and head back, passing by the water-bearers who've stopped to rest under a fig tree. One of them is humming a tune you heard a few nights ago. It's the same flute melody from the quiet man on the scaffold. Strange how sound travels, how even a melody can find a life beyond its maker.
Returning to the site, you spot Hinu again. He's inspecting the hauling ramp, poking the wooden beams with a dowel. "Good angle," he says, mostly to himself. "Good lean." Then, catching your eye, "You'll be on pulley rotation tomorrow." Your stomach sinks slightly. Pulley rotation means elevation blocks, ones that have to be hoisted vertically rather than dragged. It's more technical, more dangerous, and the margin for error is smaller. Still, it's considered prestigious work. Not everyone's trusted for it. You nod. "Understood." He pauses. "You've done well." That's it. No praise, no smile. Just a flat statement of fact. But coming from Hinu, it might as well be a kiss from the gods. The day winds down with fewer tasks. With the priests finally gone, the work site exhales. Even the foremen seem more relaxed. A few begin their routines of oiling their tools or sharpening blades in rhythmic strokes that produce a soft, metallic whisper. As the sun begins its descent again, casting long golden shadows across the sand, you climb a short embankment to get a better view of the pyramid. It stands taller now, sharper. You trace the edge with your eyes, from the base all the way to the partially completed point. There, a flicker of movement catches your attention. Workers placing the uppermost casing stones, the polished limestone slabs designed to catch and reflect sunlight so brilliantly that the entire monument would have once gleamed like a beacon. "Do you think they'll finish it before we die?" KB asks, appearing beside you. You shrug. "Does it matter?" He thinks for a moment.
I suppose not. But it'd be nice to see the tip. Just once. You both fall silent. Below, the workers begin to file out. Some heading toward the canal to rinse off, others back to the village for evening meals and sleep. The last light clings to the top of the structure, setting it aglow for a few sacred seconds before sinking beneath the dunes. And as you descend the slope, footsteps soft in the sand, you carry with you a strange, quiet pride. One block at a time, one story at a time, one intention, misaligned or not, at a time.
Evening pulls its dusty veil across the sky as you make your slow return toward the village. There's a stiffness in your calves that only stone pulling can produce, and the feeling of your tunic clinging in places it has no business clinging is now just part of life, like sunrise or foreman or the grumbling belly that reminds you, dinner's coming. The air smells faintly of charcoal and crushed garlic. Someone's already begun cooking. The scent lingers over the camp like a promise. A small one, but still a promise. You veer toward home, weaving past others shuffling in the same direction, some of them muttering, others silent, one man singing softly about a goose that refused to lay any egg that wasn't round enough for the temple tax. Your hut is a modest thing. Mud brick walls, one wobbly door, and a flat roof where your children like to pretend they're astronomers, or pharaohs, or both. You step inside and are immediately greeted by the all-too-familiar chorus of voices. Abba! 3 small bodies launch at you like overzealous ibises. Their hair is sun-bleached and full of sand. One clutches a half-squished fig, another has a wooden carving of a hippopotamus, and the third, your youngest, seems to be wearing a linen strip as a cape, declaring himself King of Lice. You raise an eyebrow. That's not a title to brag about. He means mice, your partner says gently, appearing from the corner of the room, holding a bowl of soaked lentils. At least I hope he does. Dinner is served in familiar fashion. A flat loaf of barley bread with a side of beans that are equal parts nourishing and suspiciously crunchy. You bite into something with texture and consider whether it's grit, sand, or just extra protein. You decide not to ask. Between bites, the children ask questions you half answer. How big is the pyramid now? Big enough that your feet would get tired walking around it. Will the pharaoh live inside it? No, he'll be dead, but sure, let's say yes. Did you get to meet him? No, and that's good news. You try to relax, reclining on a straw mat, watching your kids reenact a dramatic tale of pyramid construction. One plays a scribe and dramatically faints after measuring the stars wrong. Another pretends to pull a block while the third yells, "Faster! The foreman has gas again!" You smile in spite of yourself. The parody's a little too accurate. As the meal winds down, the nightly ritual begins. Lice inspection. It's less of a tradition and more of a necessity. You sit with your knees up, letting your partner sift carefully through your hair using a fine-toothed comb made from polished bone. The process is slow, meticulous, and more intimate than romantic. She clucks her tongue as she finds one, then another.
They always hide behind your ears, she mutters, like spies. You grimace. I told them I'd pay rent, but they won't listen. Tell them again tomorrow, loudly. It's not just you. The kids get checked too. One by one, their little heads are combed. There's some squealing, some scratching, and at least one false alarm that turns out to be a sesame seed. It's all part of the evening dance. Lice are the great equalizer in pyramid life. They don't care if you're hauling granite or writing sacred geometry in ink made of soot and spit. They come for everyone, even the priests, though they'll never admit it. Outside, the desert night is settling in. The sky is velvet now, sprinkled with stars so bright they almost look close enough to pluck. You step out, just for a breath of fresher air, and find Kebi leaning against a fence post nearby, chewing something that looks like it used to be a date. You survived? He asks. Barely. My children staged a reenactment. Was there a priest? Fainted from the weight of his scroll. He snorts. Classic. The two of you stand there in the quiet for a while. The moon's rising slowly over the dunes, casting a faint silver glow across the rooftops. Somewhere a dog barks lazily. Someone else is playing a reed flute again. The same drifting tune, never quite resolved, like a story with no ending. You sit down on the packed earth and exhale slowly, letting your spine relax against the wall behind you. I scratched my name into a block today, Kebby says after a moment. You look over. Yeah? Just small, beneath the edge, where the casing stone will cover it soon. You nod. I've done that. You think anyone will find them? Maybe. In 1,000 years. If the casing falls off. Kebby leans back, arms behind his head. Will be funny. Imagine some scribe digging around and finding Kebby was here under the pharaoh's nose. You smile. He'd probably think you were a priest. Kebby looks pleased. Yeah, let him wonder. There's something oddly comforting about it, the idea that your name might outlive your body, hidden in the very bones of the monument. Not celebrated, not honored, just known by someone, somewhere, even if they don't know who you really were. Your partner calls from the doorway. They're asleep. You nod, rising slowly, joints clicking like poorly carved hinges. See you tomorrow, you tell Kebby. Unless the lice take me in my sleep, he says solemnly. Inside, your hut is quiet now. You lie down beside your partner, the two of you shoulder to shoulder, staring up at the dim ceiling. Did it move today? The block? Yeah. 1 cubit. She exhales softly. Well, that's something. Outside, the wind begins to pick up. A warm breeze carrying the scent of dry grass and distant river mud rolls through the camp. You let your eyes close. You think about the block again, about the 1 cubit. Not because it matters necessarily, but because you moved it. You. And maybe tomorrow, you'll move another. Maybe.
You don't remember falling asleep, just the gentle sound of someone's breathing beside you, the creak of the reed roof, and the faint hum of nighttime insects fading into your dreams. What you do remember is the breeze. Soft, warm, threading through the narrow lanes of the village, brushing against your skin like fingers dipped in the Nile. It carries the dust of the day and a promise that, if you're lucky, the air will stay kind until dawn. And for once, the promise holds. You wake with the sensation of coolness still clinging to your arms. The air is lighter, not yet scorched. When you step outside, the moon is barely visible, just a pale memory in the west, and the sun hasn't quite climbed over the limestone ridge to the east. For a moment, there is stillness, a hush, a sense that the world hasn't quite begun yet. Then, a goat bleats, loudly, somewhere too close to your ear. Of course. The moment is gone, and so you begin. You walk slowly through the waking village, still rubbing the sleep from your eyes. Others are stirring too. Fathers tying sandals, mothers feeding sleepy children bits of dried fig or mashed lentils. Dogs trotting between huts in search of dropped crumbs and scraps of affection. The camp has its own heartbeat, its own rhythm, rough, dusty, and always a little too fast. You pause briefly to check the sky. The stars have mostly vanished, but Orion's belt still lingers faintly overhead, just visible against the paling blue. It's become a habit, this early check-in with the cosmos, the same way others might check the position of the Nile or the size of the date harvest. Orion is always watching, probably judging too, but at least he's quiet about it. At the work site, things are already buzzing. Today you've been assigned to a high scaffold crew. Pulley rotation. Hainu wasn't bluffing. There's an eerie sense of pride about it.
You've graduated from ground hauling. Now you work up, not just horizontally across the ramp, but vertically, helping place the blocks that mark the pyramid's narrowing ascent. You'll be dealing with counterweights, crude cranes, and ropes that creak with the same ominous tone as a sarcophagus lid opening. It's risky. It's tiring. It's oddly exhilarating. Your section of the scaffold has a view that stretches far over the desert. From here, the Nile gleams in the distance like a silver thread. You can even see the village rooftops, tiny and fragile. A couple of palm trees wave lazily near the water canal, as if applauding your early shift start.
Kebi joined you not long after, yawning into his sleeve. If I fall, promise to catch me. I'll write your name on a block, you say. That's worse. Then don't fall. Your team today consists of 6 men and 1 overseer with a sour expression and a reed tucked behind his ear. The work is slow, precise. Blocks are hoisted by rope, sometimes greased, sometimes dry. One man shouts, another signals, and yet another tries to keep the ascending mass from swinging too far left or right. Your job is to guide the block's landing. You wait, hands at the ready, as the slab slowly rises up towards your level. It groans against the weight of gravity, creaking like a complaining elder. Then it's there, within reach, swaying ever so slightly in the hot air. You and your partner push against it, guiding it toward its final place in the ascending wall. It fits, barely, but it fits. You exhale. 1 down. This continues for hours. Each block is a character. Some are cooperative, light, and obedient. Others are stubborn, oddly shaped, prone to tipping at the worst moment. There's a rhythm to it, though. A pulse. You move, sweat, lift, adjust. And between blocks, there's chatter. Stories. Kebi tells one about a man who once claimed he could summon a hawk just by whistling. He spent 6 months practicing, then ended up attracting only a confused lizard. Another worker, Baku, recounted a dream he had with a pyramid open like a date, and inside was a golden staircase that led to a giant fish who knew all your secrets. Did the fish say anything? You ask. He said I should stop sleeping near the onions. Fair enough. The work breaks briefly around midday. You sit high on the scaffold, legs dangling, chewing on a piece of stale bread that tastes better than it should. From here, you can see the curve of the pyramid beginning to take shape, the tilt inward, the narrowing. It's strange to think that each layer was once just another stone in the dirt, hauled and placed by tired hands like yours. Below, the usual chaos continues. A chisel has gone missing again. The foreman blames the new guy blames the goat. No one blames the goat because no one wants to be the one to chase it.
And above it all, the sun reigns. Relentless, uninterested, a blinding god that watches you sweat without blinking. Your skin itches, your arms ache, and yet you reach for another block. The afternoon passes slowly. You think about the ancient rumor that workers were once buried in the pyramid walls if they made a mistake too big to fix. Historians still argue whether this ever truly happened or if it's just a tale to keep everyone on their toes. Either way, you check your measurements twice. By late afternoon, the final block of the day is in place. It fits like a last piece of an imperfect puzzle. Not perfectly, of course. This is Egypt, not a miracle, but close enough that the overseer doesn't frown. And that's a victory. As you descend the scaffold, your hands throb. The calluses are thicker now, the skin beneath them tender. Your clothes are stiff with salt, and your legs, well, your legs feel like they belong to someone else entirely. At the base of the pyramid, you pause and look up. You've been so focused on the work, the ropes, the pulleys, the angles, that you haven't stopped to appreciate the whole. The structure is enormous now, towering. Even unfinished, it dominates the horizon. A monument to something too big to name,
too heavy to lift alone and too strange to fully understand. And yet, here you are, part of it, not in stories, not in glory, but in stone. You head home as the wind shifts again. It carries the smell of cooked onions and wet dust. Your stomach growls in anticipation. Tonight's dinner might include lentil stew, if the rations held up. You pass by a group of children chasing each other with palm fronds, laughing and screaming. One little girl nearly trips over your foot. She pauses, beams up at you and declares, "You smell like pyramid." You salute her with a tired smile. And so will you one day. Ew. Fair enough. By the time you reach your hut, the moon is already rising. It casts long shadows across the rooftops, turning every mud brick corner into a soft watercolor blur. You sit outside for a moment before entering, letting your body cool in the breeze. You wonder what tomorrow will bring. More blocks, probably. Maybe a stuck pulley. Maybe another priest with a scroll and a new opinion about the stars. But also, the view from the scaffold, the sound of stone finding its place, the quiet pride of guiding something ancient into being. That's enough. That's everything.
You drift into sleep with the sounds of soft snoring, chirping crickets, and the occasional creak of reed mats as your children shift positions. The night air wraps around you like a worn linen robe, frayed but familiar. For a while, your mind floats between dreams and memory, and eventually settles into the warm, strange space of imagining something better. And in that hazy state just before dawn, you begin to dream. You're still you, but not the version who pulls stones and scratches bug bites. In this dream, you wear a white linen robe, pressed and gleaming. You walk upright, your back straight for once, and in your hands, instead of a frayed rope or a dull chisel, you hold a scroll, a long one, covered in neat, sacred glyphs. You're a priest, not a mighty one, no fanfare or gold bracelets, just one of the thoughtful ones, the kinds who lean over ancient texts in cool, shaded temples, who smell like incense and old papyrus instead of garlic and wet stone dust. You smile in your sleep. As the dream unfolds, you wander down echoing corridors, the stone beneath your sandals cool and clean. The temple walls are covered in colorful frescoes, scenes of gods offering life and order to the world. Birds call from somewhere outside, and there's the low murmur of students repeating prayers. You pass rows of scribes copying texts with styluses made of reed and ink made from soot and red ochre. One of them nods at you, respectfully. You, in this version of yourself, are someone people ask for advice, someone who reads omens in the stars, not sweat in the fabric of your tunic. It's not a wild dream, not grand, just quiet, dignified. No yelling foreman, no crushed toes, no sand in your mouth. And yet, just as you begin to explain the significance of Ra's journey through the underworld to a group of wide-eyed apprentices, the dream flickers. Something pulls you away. A voice. No, not quite a voice. A buzzing. You open your eyes to find a fly exploring your nostril. Classic. You swat it away and sit up, stretching with a groan that sounds older than you are. Your back complains, your knees echo the complaint, and the robe? Gone. You're back in your usual tunic, creased, damp with last night's sweat, and vaguely smelling of onions. But for a brief moment, you smile. The dream lingers.
Your partner stirs beside you. You were grinning. I was a priest, you mumble. Well, she says, you still talk in your sleep like one. You stand, rub your eyes, and prepare for another day in the dust. Outside, the air is cooler than usual.
a rare mercy. You walk toward the canal to splash your face, passing a scribe who's already at work under a shaded awning, his stylus scratching softly against a sheet of papyrus. He looks up, offers a polite nod, and returns to his work. You stare at him a moment longer than usual. By the time you reach the pyramid site, your fantasy has worn off. You're not in a temple, you're not surrounded by prayers, you're back among groaning wood, heavy stone, and men trying to look busier than they are. But still, the idea of being a priest, it clings like a stubborn tick. The morning job is relatively simple. You're helping finish a narrow chamber near the base, where workers will later slide in the so-called relieving blocks. It's cramped, quiet work, fewer people, more echoes, less shouting, almost contemplative. You find yourself tracing the outline of a block with your fingertip, imagining hieroglyphs decorating its surface. You whisper to yourself, half serious, "May your name be remembered in 1,000 scrolls." Kebi, nearby, overhears. "Talking to the rocks again?" "Better company than most people," you reply. He nods sagely. "True. Stones rarely steal your figs." Work continues. A narrow shaft needs reinforcement, and you and a few others hoist a limestone beam into place. It's hot, but not unbearable. There's even a breeze. Warm, dusty, but welcome. Someone mentions that a priest visited the site earlier in the morning. Apparently he brought offerings, bread, incense, and a dead goose, all placed at the foundation in honor of the gods who, it's hoped, will ensure the structure's safety and the pharaoh's journey to the afterlife. You didn't see him, but it makes you wonder again. Not about the goose, but about the strange overlap between the divine and the dusty. How temples rise alongside pyramids. How men like you toil in the heat while others whisper prayers in sacred halls. And how both, sweat and scroll, somehow build eternity together. Historians still argue whether pyramid builders like you were ever trained in spiritual rituals. Some believe select workers participated in ceremonies to bless each layer. Others dismiss it as romantic fiction. You like to imagine it's true, that someday, before your bones turn to dust, you might be called to burn incense beside a slab you helped place. That someone might nod at you, not as a worker, but as a keeper of sacred stone.
That's not the same as dreaming of being a priest, but it's something. The midday break arrives. You perch in the shadow of the pyramid, sipping warm beer from a clay cup, letting it fizz slightly in your nose. Someone nearby sings softly. Another whistles. You lean your head back against the cool stone, feeling its massive presence behind you. You ever wonder, Kebi asks, if we're building this for the gods or for us? Both, you say. Probably neither. He nods slowly. Deep. Not really. Just tired. In the afternoon, you help repack mud and gravel beneath a walkway. You press down the mixture with your feet, rhythmically stomping, a process that feels somewhere between farming and dancing. As you do, you remember a story the priest once told in the village temple. It was about Thoth, god of wisdom, who once disguised himself as a mortal to walk among the builders. He watched them work, listened to their complaints, laughed at their songs, and at night, he scratched their names into the sky so that Ra himself would remember. You stomp harder, hoping he's watching now. As the sun lowers, your group is dismissed. The overseer waves a hand. Tools clatter into baskets. Someone groans theatrically. Another yells, "Who has my chisel?" A daily refrain that's somehow never resolved. You trudge back to camp, feet aching, dream fading but not forgotten. That evening, after washing with cold canal water and scraping dried clay from your arms, you find a quiet corner near your home. The children are off chasing a chicken. Your partner is muttering about cracked bowls. You sit alone for a moment, staring at the sky. The stars are brighter tonight.
Orion's belt gleams like a trio of fresh coins. You stare at it, wondering if there's a block up there with your name on it. You pick up a bit of charcoal, left over from the cook fire, and gently mark a stone near your door. Thoth knows. No one will see it, no one will care, but it feels right. Even if you never wear priestly robes, even if your dream remains a dream, you've left something behind. A whisper, a joke, a hope. And for now, that's enough. The morning begins with unusual excitement. Not the good kind, like fresh dates or an unexpected festival. No, this is the kind of excitement that smells faintly like trouble, mixed with stale sweat and fresh lies. You're still rubbing sleep from your eyes when the rumor reaches you. Someone in your crew claims a cobra slithered into the worker tents during the night. Not just any cobra, but one that made a very dramatic appearance in someone's bedding. The someone in question? Hapu, the lean, sly-faced laborer who always seems just a little too clean for someone hauling blocks all day. You squint across the open courtyard where the morning muster is gathering. Sure enough, there he is, sitting on an overturned basket, one arm theatrically bandaged, the other gesturing with the flair of a stage performer. "Fangs the size of my thumb," he's telling a small but growing audience. "And a hood like Ra's own parasol." You roll your eyes so hard your neck pops. Kebi sidles up next to you, a half-chewed fig in one hand. He's calling it a sacred sign. Says the gods don't want him hauling stone anymore. Of course not, you mutter. Next he'll say he's meant to interpret dreams. He already did, Kebi replies, eyes twinkling. Told someone their dream about flying sheep means there'll be a barley shortage. Of course he did. You're not exactly unsympathetic. Cobras are no joke. You've seen what they can do. Those beady eyes, the flickering tongue, the way they move like something drawn on papyrus coming to life. But something about Hapu's story feels curated. Like maybe the snake didn't so much strike as wander vaguely in his direction. And maybe the bite looks suspiciously like a scratch from a thorn bush. Historians still argue whether workers genuinely believed in divine omens like this, or whether clever men like Hapu simply played the system. Evidence of formal snake-related exemptions is lacking, but there's definitely precedent for superstition serving as a get-out-of-labor card. And yet, somehow, it works. The overseer arrives not long after, chewing a twig and looking unimpressed. Hapu recounts the tale again, this time with a limp. The overseer snorts, mutters something about sacred nonsense, and then, shockingly, reassigns him. No hauling for Hapu, no pulleys, no hauling sand by the basket load. Instead, he's made tent overseer, a position no one knew existed until 10 minutes ago. Your crew watches in a mix of disbelief and awe as Hapu strolls off, whistling, to inspect canvas integrity. Well, Kebi says, either the gods love him or he's the snake. You can't decide whether to be impressed or deeply offended. The rest of the day carries on with a kind of simmering disbelief. While Hapu lounges in the shade, you return to moving limestone blocks, pushing, lifting, and guiding each one into place with aching muscles and dusty hands. But the snake story lingers in the background like a fly you can't quite swat. It sparks other tales. One man says his cousin once smeared crocodile dung on his feet to fake a rash and got 3 days off. Another swears his brother convinced a priest he was possessed by the spirit of a misaligned obelisk. You're not entirely sure what that means, but it sounds uncomfortable. Everyone has a story, it seems. And now that Hapu's pulled it off, more ideas start to bubble. A sore back here, a twisted ankle there. Even Baku's joking that he's going to tell the foreman
His dreams have been haunted by cats with human voices.
Careful, you say. That might just get you promoted to shrine custodian. The day wears on. You work in the mid-slope again, which means another long session of hauling, guiding, and the occasional narrow escape from falling tools. A hammer slips from a scaffold 2 levels up and narrowly misses your foot. You step aside just in time, mutter a quiet thanks to any god listening, and keep moving. There's a strange unity in all this chaos. The singing resumes, louder today, as if everyone's trying to drown out the Hapu incident. The songs are simple, rhythmic chants about the pharaoh's strength, the god's wisdom, and the hope that lunch includes more than yesterday's lentils. You catch yourself humming along. The sun climbs higher, and the heat presses down like a second tunic made entirely of flame. You sip from a shared water skin that tastes faintly of leather and dust. It's not refreshing exactly, but it's not death, which feels like a win. Lunch arrives late, as usual. You chew slowly, savoring the texture of dry bread as if it's something more decadent. Across the plaza, Hapu is reclining beneath a makeshift awning, inspecting a rope for fraying. You're almost impressed with his commitment to the bit. Almost. In the afternoon, your team is assigned to help repair a collapsed retaining wall near the base. It's heavy work, muddy and frustrating, but oddly satisfying. The kind of task that requires focus but not too much thinking. You fall into rhythm again, pushing rocks into place, scraping away debris, packing mud, smoothing seams. And while your hands work, your mind wanders. Back to Hapu, to a snake, to the audacity of it all. You start to imagine what you might fake. A vision, maybe, a fever, a dream so vivid it convinces the village priest to write a report. But even as you entertain the idea, something pulls you back. A small voice inside, the one that never speaks loud, but always speaks true. You wouldn't feel right. Not because of loyalty, not because you're braver or more honest, but because somewhere in all this absurdity, you've come to take pride in what you do. Not just in surviving the heat or avoiding smashed fingers, but in the fact that you're part of something real, something that will still be standing when your bones are long gone. You think about your dream again, the priestly version of yourself, the scrolls, the silence. You can't help but wonder if that version of you would fake a cobra bite. Probably not. Maybe that's the difference. The sun dips low as the work ends. Tools are stashed, shirts are wrung out, feet are inspected for new blisters, the usual end-of-day rituals. As you walk back to the camp, Kebi grins at you. Still thinking about the snake? Thinking about writing one a thank you note. He's got better job security than we do. That night, as you settle on your mat, your partner hands you a small wrapped bundle. Found it in the market. Old scribe kit. Doesn't work too well, but he thought you'd like it. Inside is a cracked inkwell and 2 dried out styluses. You stare at it for a moment. It's nothing and everything. Later, by the firelight, you scratch a symbol into a flat stone. Not a word, not yet, just a shape, the beginning of something. Maybe you're not a priest. Maybe you never will be. But you are a builder of walls, of dreams, of stories. And that, you decide, is enough.
The first sign is the smell. Not a bad one for once. In fact, it's kind of pleasant. Damp, earthy, with just a hint of coolness. It's the smell of the Nile announcing its seasonal visit, and everyone who isn't half asleep or ankle deep in sand notices it at the same time. You're halfway through hoisting a basket of gravel when the call goes out. First the whisper, then a wave, and finally, someone just yells it from the scaffolding. The river's rising. For a moment, there's silence. You and the others freeze, not from fear, but from disbelief. Then it begins. The grins, the cheers, the slow realization that today's back-breaking work might just be canceled. A worker named Jet actually drops to his knees in mock prayer. The Nile blesses us. Let it rise. Let it flow. Let us not carry more limestone today. You chuckle, though you're cautious. These things can be overstated.
A small swell, a trickle of river fingers reaching farther than usual, none of that necessarily means a full flood. But then Kebi, who once spent 3 months helping dig irrigation canals, dips his finger into the soil and nods. It's real. It's coming. And just like that, the mood shifts. No one's fully relaxing yet. Years of foreman barking, "You think this is a holiday?" have trained you well. But there's a buzz in the air, a current, like the pyramid itself is exhaling. Not everyone is pleased, though. The overseers start pacing. Plans are adjusted, schedules muttered under breath, and ropes double-checked as if sheer organization could keep a river in place. One of them barks something about contingency masonry, which no one quite understands. But here's the thing about ancient Egypt. The river rules everything. The annual inundation of the Nile is the lifeblood of the kingdom. It brings silt, fertility, fish, and more importantly for you, blessed days off. The waters can rise enough to make the construction site too unstable, too muddy, too impractical to continue. When that happens, work halts. You'd think the pharaoh himself would frown upon this, but in truth, the whole calendar bends around the flood. Religious festivals blossom during this time, taxes shift, and priests proclaim it all divine favor. Some even believe the Nile swelling is the literal tears of Isis mourning Osiris. Historians still debate whether pyramid crews truly got time off during minor floods, or if that's just romantic hindsight from lazy scribes. But you know what muddy sandals feel like, and you're betting on a break. By mid-morning, the signs are undeniable. The banks closest to the canal road have turned to sludge. Supply carts can't move. Sandbags begin appearing where measuring rods once stood. Your feet squish as you walk. You're officially stood down. The announcement is brief and delivered with such reluctance that you'd think someone had died. But no one mourns, unless you count the overseer whose job was to keep you hauling. You and your crew cheer, not loud, but genuinely. The sort of exhausted, happy cheer that smells faintly of onions and long overdue naps. Now comes the real question. What do you do with a sudden day off? You don't get many, and this isn't like a festival day where everyone's expected to march, sing, or act reverent while enduring the heat in their best tunics. No, this is accidental leisure, stolen, deliciously unstructured. You head down toward the water with Kebi, who swears by mud watching as a legitimate pastime. It's exactly what it sounds like. Sitting near the Nile, watching it creep over the edges of its banks, curling like slow fingers across the land.
Better than watching stones not move, he says. You admit he has a point. The breeze down here is richer, cooler, touched by the water's presence. You can smell the silt, thick with nutrients, and the faint aroma of water cabbage growing in the marshes. Fishermen are already preparing nets, and farmers arrive with wooden rods to measure how far the river has pushed. Everything shifts. Children chase frogs. Women wash clothes upstream. Even the priests make an appearance. Robes gathered, incense sticks wafting in gentle arcs as they chant something about divine rhythm and seasonal blessings. You listen, half interested, half asleep. This, you think, is the other Egypt, the one not made of stone and labor, the one that flows, breathes, and whispers, the one that comes not from chisels or blueprints, but from the river's pulse. Later that afternoon, you return home with damp feet and a pleasant ache behind your eyes, the kind of ache that says, you earned rest, and now you have it. Your children are sculpting little pyramids out of wet mud near the threshold. They've even shaped tiny ramps and lined up small stones, river pebbles, pretending to haul them with string. One of them shouts, "I'm the foreman! Do it again, or I'll curse you!" You snort. He sounds just like the real one. Your partner appears, hand on hips. Don't encourage them. But you do. You squat down, help them shape a smoother ramp, even scratch a few symbols onto the capstone. It's messy, it's silly, and it makes you forget for a while that you're supposed to be building something huge and sacred for someone you'll never meet. Instead, you're just here, smearing mud on your forearms, laughing at your son's impression of a scribe, and pretending, if only for an hour, that this is what eternity looks like. As the sun begins its slow descent, the color of the light shifts. Gold pours across rooftops, dances on the water's edge. You sit near your doorway, chewing a strip of dried fish and watching the village shimmer. It's quiet, not silent, but soft. The flood has stilled everything. And yet the pyramid looms in the distance, even from here. You can just make out its half-finished top, the way the sunlight kisses the upper layers, making them glow. It's funny. You'd think a break from work would mean forgetting it completely, but instead you find yourself thinking about it differently. Not with dread, but with distance, with a strange affection, like seeing a massive animal asleep. You realize something else too. This flood, this day off, this chance to just be, it's part of the pyramid too. Part of what makes it possible. Because no one, not even the strongest man or the most relentless planner, can argue with the river. And maybe that's the point. Maybe building something eternal requires surrendering to things that are bigger than stone. Like water, like rest, like mud pyramids made by giggling children. You fall asleep early that night, not from exhaustion, but from fullness, from the coolness still clinging to your skin, from the laughter echoing in your ears, from the scent of wet earth drifting through the thatch. And in your dreams, you're standing at the edge of the Nile again. But this time, it doesn't rise to flood. It parts, just enough to reveal something buried beneath. A stone, small, etched with your name. You pick it up and carry it with you.
You wake before dawn, as always, but this morning carries something unusual, the hush after a flood. The ground is still damp, the air still cool, and the camp smells like wet straw, silty puddles, and the faint wood smoke of someone ambitious enough to start breakfast early. Your muscles ache less than usual. Maybe it's the rest day you just had, or maybe it's the lingering satisfaction of doing nothing. A whole day spent mud watching, joking with Kebi, dodging responsibilities while pretending to monitor the river's divine will. Glorious. But now the water has begun to recede, just enough to muddy the edges without justifying another break. The supervisors are moving again. Work will resume, as sure as the sun climbs the sky. You know it. Everyone does. Still, you move slower this morning. There's a softness to your steps. You notice things more clearly. The frogs singing from flooded corners, the thin mist curling off the canal, the two boys pretending to be gods tossing sticks like scepters. It's on your way to the work site that you remember something you nearly forgotten. The name stone. Your name. Scratched into a block of limestone weeks ago now. You aren't even sure why you did it, just that it felt important, necessary even. A whisper of self in a world obsessed with kings and gods and rocks. You wonder if it's still there. The site is different after a flood. Not completely transformed, but changed. The paths are slick, the scaffolding has shifted. There's a new hum of tension in the air, the kind that comes from trying to restart a massive machine without all of its pieces dry. You find your crew at the mid-ramp, pulleys being adjusted, ropes checked, wedges hammered back into place. Kebi greets you with a grunt. Back to the grind. You nod. Better than pulling reeds out of your sandals. The day's task is simple but heavy, aligning support blocks along the western base of the pyramid. It's not the most glamorous job, but it's methodical. Straight lines, repetition, some shouting, mostly elbow grease. You like it more than you admit. But you can't shake the thought.
Your stone. Your name. Sometime after the midday break, another meal of barley bread and cucumber water so warm it tastes like disappointment, you make your move. Need to check the southeast ramp, you tell Kebby. He doesn't question it. Bring back a new rope while you're at it. You nod and head off, heart beating faster than it should.
The southeast corner is quiet, partially shaded by the higher stones above. Not many workers are stationed here today. Most efforts are focused on the upper lift zones, where supervisors hover like vultures. You duck around a low scaffold, heart now thumping in rhythm with your footsteps. You remember the block well. It's near the corner, just beyond a partially filled gap. There was a smoothed face to it, just the right height, just the right texture. You'd used a shard of copper, scraped carefully, not too deep, just enough. And there it is, still in place. Dustier now, a little worn from the wind and grit, but still there. Your name. Not the name the overseers call you, not the abbreviated barked version, but the one your mother used, the full one. You run your fingers over it gently, as if checking that it's real. It is. You sit for a moment on the stone beside it, let your legs dangle, watch the ants crawl in a perfect line across the sand. The pyramid rises behind you, silent and solemn and slightly smug. You think about all the names inside it. Pharaoh's name, repeated dozens, hundreds of times, painted, carved, chiseled in gold. The names of priests, gods, star maps, instructions for crossing into the afterlife. A monument to power, to eternity, to control over time. And then there's yours, hidden, tiny, unimportant by comparison. But it's there, a footnote that no one will read. Unless. You glance around. Nobody's watching. You pull a flake of flint from your sash, begin scratching again, just beneath your name. You don't write anything sacred, not a prayer, not a message to the gods. You just add the word worked. You smile. That's enough. And then, because why not, you add a tiny drawing, a little stick figure pulling a stone. Crude, childlike, but honest. A breeze stirs the sand. Somewhere nearby, a foreman shouts something about the pace of turtles. You head back to your crew. Rope? Kebby asks. I shrug. They didn't have one. Of course not. The afternoon melts into the usual rhythm. Push, pull, realign. A chisel breaks. Someone curses. Someone else drops a basket of gravel on their foot and blames the gods. The sun beats down with renewed vengeance, reminding everyone that rest is fleeting and heat is eternal. But you feel lighter. Your private carving is with you now, a private rebellion, a quiet badge. Historians still debate whether ancient Egyptian laborers left graffiti behind on purpose or by accident. Some chalk it up to boredom. Others see it as a claim of existence, a small defiance in a sea of hierarchy. You know the answer. You were here. You worked. You lived. And now somewhere inside one of the greatest monuments ever built, a little stick figure hauls a stone next to a name that nobody else might care about, but you do. That night, you fall asleep early. Your mat feels softer than usual. Maybe the flood left the ground slightly spongy. Maybe your body's just too tired to complain. You dream again. Not of royalty, not of gods, but of that name on that block. And this time in your dream, someone finds it. They brush the dust away. They read it aloud. They nod, and they understand.
The morning begins, as always, with light bleeding across the horizon like honey poured slowly from the sky. You're already awake when the first rays hit the curve of the pyramid's base, turning dusty limestone into molten gold for a moment so beautiful it hurts. It's a work day, sure, but something feels different. There's no festival, no royal visit, no flood in sight. The Nile is calm, subdued. The village is still half asleep, but in your bones, in the quiet space behind your ribs,
you feel something shift. Maybe it's the weather. Maybe it's the way your children clung to you last night and whispered that they dreamed you were the one who built the very top of the pyramid, the pointy part that touches the stars. Or maybe it's because you're almost done. Not just with this section of the structure, not just with today's assignment, but with the work itself. Not quitting, not yet, but reaching that stage where you know the pyramid is no longer growing the way it once did. The last chambers are carved. The highest tiers are nearing completion. The ramps will start coming down. The crews will thin. The foreman will begin grumbling less about rope tension and more about what they'll do next season. It's strange. You've spent so much of your life in this place, with these people, under this sun, that you can't quite imagine what comes after. You arrive on site and the noise is already swelling. Rope creaks, copper on stone scraping, someone coughing up a lung, someone else laughing about it. The pyramid looms as it always has, patient, enormous, a silent participant in your life. Today's task is different. You're assigned to what they call casing work, finalizing the outer limestone blocks, the smooth white ones, polished to reflect the sun. These aren't the gritty, heavy foundation bricks you've been dragging for seasons. These are gleaming, almost delicate, like skin, like memory. You're told to help install one near the corner. It's not the most physically demanding job, but it requires precision, care, a steady hand, and yes, teamwork. Which is funny considering how often you and Kebby argue about which direction slightly left actually means. Still, you get into the rhythm. Raise, slide, align, tap with a wooden mallet, step back, squint, adjust, repeat. As the day stretches on, the sun hits the polished surfaces and throws light back at you in odd angles. You squint, not from pain, but wonder. You think about how, when this is finished, the whole thing will gleam so brightly it can be seen from across the river, maybe even farther. Historians still argue whether the casing stones were fully completed or only partial by the time the workforce disbanded, or if earthquakes and centuries stripped them away. But in this moment, you don't care, because this one is real. You touch it. You smooth the seam with your palm. You press your forehead against its cool, pale surface for just a breath, and you feel the years press back. Later that day, during a break, you climb to a small platform on the ramp's edge. It's higher than usual. From here, you can see not just the village or the pyramid's belly, but the river curling beyond, and the desert stretching like a lazy god all the way to the edge of forever. You sit with your knees drawn up, chewing on something chewy and barely food adjacent. Kebby joins you. Almost done, he mutters, like saying it out loud might make it less real. You nod. Yeah. You going to the quarry next season? You shrug. Maybe. Might stay. Help with temple stuff. He laughs. You? In a temple? Stonework, not praying. Ah, less likely to be cursed that way. There's a long pause, the kind that doesn't need filling. Then, just as the sun tips into that late afternoon angle where everything turns bronze, Kebby nudges you. Show me the name, he says. You blink. What name? He gives you a look. You sigh. How do you know about that? I've seen you sneak off rubbing something in the corner like a beetle polishing a rock. You laugh despite yourself. It's stupid. Still want to see it. You take him later. Wait until most of the workers are busy hauling debris and the overseers are distracted with measurements and mud complaints. You lead him around the quiet side, to the place with the faded scrawl. Your name, the little stick figure, the scratched word, worked. He kneels beside it, traces a finger over the groove. After a moment, he pulls out a shard of stone and adds his own name beneath yours. Then he adds a second figure, 2 people hauling a block. Then he sits back satisfied. "We should have added a cat," he says. You grin. "Next time." That night, after the sun vanishes and dinner turns into sleepy murmurs, you lie under the stars and stare upward. The wind is soft, the insects quieter. Your muscles ache in familiar places, but your thoughts drift. Not to pharaohs, not to gods, not even to pyramids, but to memory. You wonder, absurdly, if someone someday will find your scratched mark and wonder who you were. Not just your name, but your life, your sweat, your dreams. You wonder if it matters, and you decide it does. Because you lived. You worked. You added your stone. You added your story. And now, the pyramid glows in the moonlight behind your eyes, not as something vast or eternal, but as something personal. A place where your name lives, quietly, in a corner. And that's enough.
And now, as the wind shifts gently across the quiet desert plain, and the last murmurs of the pyramid site fade into stillness, you lie there on your back, your body finally still, your thoughts slower than they've been all day. The sky above you stretches wide and endless, sprinkled with stars that blink softly like distant lanterns left out for travelers too long on the road. Your breathing matches the rhythm of the night breeze, steady, deep, soft. The work is done. The stone is placed. The chisel is quiet. The pyramid still stands, and your mark, however small, is etched somewhere within it. Not in bold script, not in gold leaf, just a whisper on stone, the kind of message only time itself knows how to read. You remember the feel of the limestone under your fingers, the soft scrape of the flint, the heat of the sun pressing down, the scent of sand, sweat, and barley. And you remember the quiet moments, the joke between friends, the call of your child, the soft, worn smile of someone who knows the day is over. It doesn't matter if history remembers your name. You remember. You remember the rhythm of the pull. You remember the patience of the wait. You remember the shape of the stone before it became part of something larger. And now, you're free to let it all drift away, like sand carried off on the breeze, like footsteps fading behind you as you lie down to rest. No need to hold anything, no need to carry any more. Just sleep now. The pyramid will be there tomorrow, and you, my friend, have already done enough.